Chapter 634. Li Yundong's words were sonorous and powerful. He mercilessly exposed Masako Tachibana's trick of wanting to use the power of defeating Li Yundong to deter other cultivation sections. Moreover, there was no dirty word in Li Yundong's words, but every word was like a throwing dagger, and every sentence was like an axe, knife and fork, which was so sharp that people couldn't resist it. Even Masako Tachibana, who was used to seeing great storms, had her face turn blue and white for a while. She gritted her teeth and looked at Saionji Tsunekatsu with hatred. She wanted to burn this guy's bones to ashes immediately. Why didn't he tell me about this? In Masako Tachibana's opinion, since Li Yundong could beat Saionji Tsunekatsu like this as soon as they met, it was obvious that he was a very powerful opponent. But if the opponent was only good at kung fu and not good at talking, then she could take advantage of the strong advantage of the home court and exert strong psychological pressure on the opponent with words, prompting the opponent to make mistakes in the next fight. Although Masako Tachibana was arrogant and conceited, she did not underestimate the enemy. She knew very well that she could not lose this battle. Otherwise, the Masako family would probably be doomed forever. However, Li Yundong's sharp words made Masako Tachibana dispel the idea of fighting with him in an instant. Masako Tachibana said hatefully, "Before, his disciple was also a sharp-tongued person. I didn't expect that his master was also a sharp-tongued person. Damn it. If you lose later, I'll beat all your teeth out." Although many of the Japanese people in the surrounding area didn't understand Li Yundong's Chinese, when they saw Li Yundong and Masako Tachibana, one was righteous and the other was angry, they couldn't help but be full of doubts for a while and whispered. What happened between them? Could it be that Masako Tachibana really did something shameful? Bastard, does Masako Tachibana need to do such a thing? Then, why is this happening? How do I know? The middle-aged man standing next to the Ise Shinto goddess took advantage of the situation and said with a smile, "It turns out that you have such a skill. Amazing, really amazing. As expected of an apostate, you can do anything." Masako Tachibana was so angry that she glared at the middle-aged man fiercely. A sharp light also flashed in the middle-aged man's eyes. Suddenly there was a boom in front of them as if a bomb had exploded out of thin air. A wave of air spread in all directions, causing the reporters around to take a few steps back in horror. At this time, Masako Tachibana couldn't get out of the stage, but she heard a kind and solemn voice coming from behind her. Amitba. Everyone looked in the direction of the voice and saw an old monk wearing a gold-rimmed red robe walking out slowly. He was the 413th monk of the Jinyin Tantrism, Jinyin Gongi. Amos Kaichi Shing, 1 Yundong, Li 1-1, aiming Li Shi Yue Yundong, said. Li 1-1 and 1 and 1-1A1, 1A Yundong Yun and 1-1. After returning the salute to them one by one, Kaichi Shing put his palms together and said to Li Yundong, "Jinren Li, even if there is a grudge, why don't we solve it in the subsequent battle? As the saying goes, revenge is revenge. Chang Xing has been beaten like this by you. Even if there is a great sin, it should offset each other." Li Yundong sneered and said, "Where is the Medicine King tripod? Return the Medicine King tripod first." Kaichi Shing hesitated for a moment and didn't say anything. Li Yundong seemed to know what he was thinking. He sneered and said, "Don't worry. Since I'm here, I will fulfill my promise and fight with you, so that you can know whether there are masters in the Chinese cultivation world. But before that, you have to return the Medicine King tripod to me, because it should have been a powerful magical weapon of China." Kaichi Shing nodded slightly and turned to a monk beside him. "Go to Chang Xing's room and have a look." Seeing that Kaichi Shing had actually listened to Li Yundong's words, the monk couldn't help but be anxious and said, "Great monk. How can you let aid?" Before he could finish his words, Kaichi Shing glanced at him slightly. Although his gaze was not sharp, it made the monk not dare to say anything more. After glaring at Li Yundong with hatred, he turned around and left. Not long after, the monk came back with a purple gold tripod furnace in his hand. Kaichi Shing took it from his hand, smiled slightly, and held the Medicine King tripod in front of Li Yundong with both hands. He said, "Please rest assured, Jinren Li." Li Yundong didn't stand on ceremony. He took the Medicine King tripod and stuffed it into the colorful brocade pouch around his waist. The Medicine King tripod, which was as big as a head, immediately disappeared, causing the Japanese reporters around to widen their eyes and exclaim. Their eyes were fixed on Li Yundong's waist as if they wanted to see what was there. Seeing that Li Yundong had accepted it, Kaichi Shing made a gesture and said, "Jinren Li, please come in." Seeing that the other party was polite, Li Yundong also politely made a gesture and said, "Great monk, please come in." The two of them were hypocritical and polite. If it weren't for the fact that the people around them had seen what had happened between the two sides, they would have thought that they were a pair of good friends who hadn't seen each other for a long time. After Kai Chi Sheng led Li Yundong into the courtyard, the reporters behind him began to make a noise. "Let us in too." "Yes, let us go in together. Why can Chinese people enter our Japanese place, but we can't enter our own?" Kai Chi Sheng frowned slightly. As he led Li Yundong into the courtyard, he said to the monk next to him, "Go and seal the door. Don't let them in." The monk nodded, and soon two monks followed him to the door. After the two men of Ise Shinto entered the courtyard, the three monks blocked the door like a city wall. They put their palms together and closed their eyes. No matter what the reporters said, they didn't move and turned a deaf ear to them. After Li Yundong entered the royal courtyard, he saw that there were tall fir trees around. Some courtyards had been beautifully designed into a garden scene. There were small bridges, flowing water, rockery and strange rocks. Stone benches, stone tables and shrines with strong Japanese style could be seen everywhere. Li Yundong followed behind Kaisai Hikaryuni. After taking a few turns, he suddenly saw that he had arrived in front of a Japanese building in the shape of a square. This building was only 2 stories high. It had cornices and arches, black tiles and red pillars. The upper floor was carved with jade and hollowed windows. Downstairs was a corridor and a hall without sliding doors. At a glance, he could see that there were many people sitting on the tatami in each room. Some of these people were wearing monk robes, while others were wearing Shintoist robes and witch robes. There were probably 200 or 300 men and women, old and young. These people were originally talking and exchanging greetings with each other. At this time, when they saw Li Yundong coming, they immediately stopped talking and looked at Li Yundong in unison. This was where almost all the elite experts of the Japanese cultivation world were. Their gazes were as oppressive as Mount Tai, which could be imagined. However, Li Yundong didn't notice it at all. With a smile on his face, he looked around in a neither servile nor overbearing manner. Li Yundong saw that one of the windows on the second floor on the east side had not been opened, while the windows on the other floors were all open. There were also some people looking down from the windows upstairs. Li Yundong pointed to the window and asked Kai Chi Sheng, who was beside him, "Who's up there?" Kai Chi Sheng smiled faintly. "His Majesty the Mikado and his wife." Li Yundong asked in surprise, "The Mikado of Japan is also here?" Kai Chi Sheng smiled and said, "What's so strange about that?" Masako Tachibana, who had been following behind, said at this time, "Will you feel any pressure fighting in front of the Mikado of Japan?" Li Yundong couldn't help laughing. "He is your Mikado, not mine. If there's pressure, it's your pressure. What does it have to do with me?" "But aren't you afraid that you will lose to me in front of His Majesty the Mikado and have no place to step down?" Masako Tachibana raised her head and laughed loudly. "That's impossible." After that, she raised her head and walked slowly into the field. At this time, the middle-aged man of Ise Shinto, who was walking behind them, also said to Li Yundong sympathetically, "Young man, I appreciate your courage, but York." As he said this, he pointed to his head and sneered, "I don't appreciate your wisdom." Li Yundong asked with great interest, "Oh? What?" At this time, the goddess of Ise Shinto, who had been as cold as ice, said coldly, "Because smart people will not choose to fight with Masako Tachibana in the main mountain of Jinyen Tantrism. You are courting death foolishly." When Li Yundong saw this goddess at first glance, he felt that she was very cold and elegant. Although she looked young, her behavior and words were like that of an old woman. She was so calm that she was a little strange. Li Yundong asked with a smile, "Why do you say that? Is Masako Tachibana particularly powerful here?" The middle-aged man of Ise Shinto laughed and said, "Are you kidding? No one has ever been able to defeat Masako Tachibana in this place. Here, the power of the gods that Mount Koya has worshipped for thousands of years will become her power. Do you think you can fight against the power of faith that has been accumulated for thousands of years? Don't talk nonsense." As he said this, the middle-aged man looked at Masako Tachibana with complicated eyes and said with emotion, "This is Masako Tachibana's home field. Chinese people in the away game, it's better to keep a low profile and be honest. I'll give you a suggestion. This suggestion is to admit defeat as soon as possible when the fight begins. The earlier you admit defeat, the greater your chance of survival. Once you make Masako Tachibana angry, it will be your doomsday." Li Yundong laughed and said, "You said that no one has ever won against Masako Tachibana here?" The Divine Lady continued coldly, "Never. Masako Tachibana has never fought with people outside Mount Koya. It turns out to be a teenage mutant ninja turtle. Li Yundong laughed and said, "Well, today I will be the first person to break her turtle shell in her home field." Seeing that Li Yundong didn't listen to him, the middle-aged man shook his head and muttered in Japanese, "What a stubborn fool. Hopeless." After that, he ignored Li Yundong and turned to the goddess beside him. He said in Japanese, "Chien, let's go. This guy is already a dead man. Don't talk to him." At this time, at the gate of the royal courtyard, the reporters of the major Japanese TV stations gradually quieted down after making a ruckus for a while. Some experienced reporters simply began to broadcast live at the gate and introduced what had just happened verbally. Just as they were talking to the camera lens, several hosts who were on the screen were stunned at the same time and looked in one direction. The reporters who were filming also turned their heads curiously, only to see three monks wearing bamboo hats, holding Buddhist staffs and cloth shoes slowly walking over behind them. Strange, why are there still people here? Although these reporters were puzzled, some of them reacted quickly. They rushed to the three monks and asked loudly, "Excuse me, are you here to attend the meeting inside? Which sect are you cultivators from? Can you take us in with you?" But no matter what they said, the three monks kept their heads down, pressed their bamboo hats down and didn't say a word. Some sharp-eyed reporters were keenly aware that there was a faint fragrance coming from the three of them. Moreover, the skin on their necks was as delicate as porcelain when they lowered their heads. They couldn't help but be stunned. They seem to be women. Are they from the Pure Land School? But I've heard that the Pure Land School brings female family members here. I've never heard of three women dressed like monks coming together. Who the hell were these three fellows? Chapter 635. The three people who cast a vote were none other than Su Chan, Ziyuan, and Zhou Qin. According to Ziyuan's plan, the three of them had secretly followed Li Yundong to Mount Koya, and then disguised themselves as the ascetic monks of the Pure Land sect. Because the ascetic monks had to walk all over the world and beg alms along the way, they all wore bamboo hats and held Buddhist staffs in their hands. The bamboo hats could shelter them from the wind and rain, and the Buddhist staffs could help them subdue demons along the way. At the same time, in order to sharpen themselves, all the ascetic monks wore straw sandals, and none of them wore cloth shoes like the three of them. With Ziyuan's meticulousness and Zhou Qin's shrewdness, they naturally thought of this. But when the three of them put on the straw sandals, they found that the 6 feet in the straw sandals were delicate and white, like jade and porcelain. They didn't look like the feet of an ascetic monk at all. In particular, the fingernails of Su Chan's toes revealed a charming pink. Even in the simple straw sandals, they looked like 10 small pink petals. The three beautiful women looked at each other's feet and had no choice but to find 3 pairs of cloth shoes with a wry smile. Others couldn't see these details, but how could the monks guarding the gate of the courtyard not see these details? How could the ascetic monks of the Pure Land sect wear cloth shoes? The 3 monks stared suspiciously at the cloth shoes on the 3 men's feet, not even blinking for a moment. Su Chan, who was walking in the middle, was stared at by the people around her, and her hair stood on end. She couldn't help whispering, "Sister Ziyuan, we seem to have been discovered. We can't get in. What should we do?" Zhou Qin, who was behind her, immediately poked her gently under the cover of her body and whispered, "Don't talk." Ziyuan also transmitted her voice, "Don't talk. Follow me." Ziyuan walked in the front, still with her head down and her bamboo hat pressed low. Under everyone's gaze, she suddenly turned to another stone road and walked in the other direction of the royal courtyard. Just as Su Chan was about to breathe a sigh of relief, she saw a Japanese reporter pouncing on her and shouting at her. Su Chan was dumbfounded. She didn't understand Japanese, so how could she know what the other party was talking about? Li Yundong could carry a translator with him and put earphones in his ears, but they couldn't. What kind of ascetic from the Japanese Pure Land sect would have earphones in their ears? Not only Su Chan, but Ziyuan and Zhou Qin also didn't understand Japanese. Their bodies froze and they became highly vigilant. Zhou Qin even subconsciously touched the Vulcan's whip hidden at her waist. Her whole body was covered with jinchi, ready to explode at any time. At this time, the attention of the 3 monks at the entrance of the royal courtyard was focused on the 3 of them. As soon as Zhou Qin mobilized her jinchi, they also felt an inexplicable danger spreading in all directions. They couldn't help but be vigilant. Seeing that the situation in front of her was about to break out, Su Chan suddenly had an idea. She pretended to be profound and pointed at herself with one finger, then shook it again. Then she turned around and urged anxiously in a very low voice that only Ziyuan could hear, Sister Ziyuan, run! Ziyuan did not dare to stop and continued to walk forward. The Japanese reporter watched them leave, but he didn't stop them. Instead, he showed a look of realization. At this time, a female reporter came over and asked curiously, Aoki-kun, why didn't these monks speak? Aoki smiled proudly and said, I asked them which sect they were from. The monk in the middle pointed to his mouth and then shook it again. Do you know what that means? The female reporter asked, does it mean that she is mute? Aoki laughed and said, no. She means that she is a person who practices silent meditation. The female reporter said with admiration, so that's how it is. Aoki-kun, you really know a lot. Aoki smiled and said, not at all. What I find strange is that people who practice silent meditation will usually prepare a small wooden sign with the words silence and silence written on it. Once someone comes to talk to them, they will take out the wooden sign. But why don't these people have it? The female reporter laughed and said, maybe they are newcomers? Aoki looked at the backs of Su-chan and the others, shook his head and sighed. Maybe 3 female monks are traveling ascetically. It must be very hard. After that, he turned around and stopped looking at Su-chan and the others. Even the 3 monks of Jinyin Tantrism at the gate of the courtyard dispelled their doubts when they saw Su-chan's movements. They turned their heads and no longer looked at them. Su-chan didn't know that she wanted to pretend to be mute, but she accidentally made the other party mistakenly think that she was an ascetic monk who practiced silent meditation. Moreover, among the Buddhist sects in the world, the silent meditation of the Pure Land sect was the most famous. Master Lianqi, an eminent monk of the Ming dynasty and the 8th ancestor of the Pure Land sect, said in his Bamboo Window Essays, the ancient said that if you don't speak for 20 years, even Buddha can't do anything to you. Su-chan, Ziyuan, and Zhou Qin went far away and came to a remote place. Su-chan patted her chest and said with a frightened face, I was scared to death. I thought that we would be exposed before Yundong started fighting. Ziyuan couldn't help but praise, Su-chan, you did a good job just now. Even I didn't think of using the method of silent meditation to avoid the other party's conversation and inquiry. This is my mistake. Fortunately, you reacted quickly. Zhou Qin couldn't help but tease her with a smile. Su-chan, you're good. You're usually stupid and don't show your strength. You can be relied on at critical moments. When Su-chan heard Ziyuan's praise, her face was full of pride. But after hearing the first half of Zhou Qin's words, her face suddenly fell. But when she heard the second half of Zhou Qin's words, her eyes immediately turned into crescent moons. Su-chan said with a smile, actually, I want to say that I'm mute and can't speak. Ziyuan was stunned. Didn't you think of using silent meditation to avoid it? Su-chan also said in surprise, I didn't bring a small wooden plate with me. How could I pretend to be silent? Zhou Qin couldn't help laughing. I wanted to praise you for your quick reaction and keen sense of opportunity, but I didn't expect you to be a blind cat bumping into a dead mouse. After Zhou Qin said this, Ziyuan, who was beside her, couldn't help laughing. We're really lucky. If those monks come to question us, we'll be in trouble. We have to be careful next time. It's impossible for us to be so lucky all the time. This is the main mountain of Jinyin Tantrism. If we're not careful, we'll be doomed eternally. However, Su-chan didn't realize that she had gone deep into the tiger's den at all. Her eyes were full of excitement and she said with a cheeky smile, it's okay. Yundong said that I'm a fool, but I'm a fool. Zhou Qin pointed at Su-chan and laughed. You finally admit that you're stupid? Su-chan stamped her feet and said angrily, you're so annoying. The little girl didn't want to be entangled in this topic with Zhou Qin, so she changed the topic and turned to Ziyuan and asked, Sister Ziyuan, what should we do now? It seems that things are not in the plan now. Ziyuan thought for a moment and said, it's also in the plan now. Just now, I was just testing to see the attitude and vigilance of the monks at the door. Now it seems that they are very vigilant. Let's wait here. I don't believe that their vigilance will still be so high when the fighting begins. Zhou Qin also nodded in agreement. That's right. Who doesn't want to see the duel between 2 top masters? All the masters in the Japanese cultivation world are here, let alone them. Su-chan also said with some excitement, then we'll take action after the fighting begins. Zhou Qin laughed. Su-chan, I didn't expect that what you said before we came here, 3 cobblers are better than 1 would really come true. Su-chan made a face at Zhou Qin and said, it's 3 cobblers. Zhou Qin laughed. Ziyuan smiled and said in a low voice, don't laugh. Keep a low profile. Don't attract other people's attention. There are still a lot of monks patrolling the mountain here. Before she could finish her words, 2 monks came over from not far away. The two monks saw the three of them at a glance and saluted them from afar. Su Chan, Ziyuan, and Zhou Qin also saluted back. Then they continued to lower their bamboo hats and quickly hid themselves in the dense fir forest. At this time, an uninvited guest came to the Qingming Shrine in the Shangjing district of Kyoto, Japan. Lu Yi slowly got off the Japanese bus and arrived at his destination, the Violent Bridge bus station. At first glance he saw that the famous Violent Bridge was an extremely ordinary asphalt bridge. The water under the bridge had long dried up, and only the railings at the head of the bridge were written in Chinese characters. Lu Yi couldn't help but sigh in a low voice. The residence of the famous Abe no Saimai has become like this now. I wonder if there are any Shikigami or Shikigami of the Onmyoji hidden under this Violent Bridge. After the death of the famous Onmyoji in Japan, Abe no Saimai, the Onmyoji, moved his residence here, which was at the intersection of Yumen Road and Zaidanjiwan Road in Heian capital at that time. Lu Yi looked around and saw that this place was the Gen position in the northeast of the Imperial Palace, which was also commonly known as the Gate of Hell. As a professional Onmyoji, the purpose of moving his residence here was to coordinate with the Gen position in the northeast of Kyoto, which was located in the Gen position, to form a double deterrent to prevent demons from invading and to prevent demons from breaking through the seal. Lu Yi laughed and said, "Good method, good method. I was wondering why you hid the soul of the mystical silver fox here. So that's how it is, so that's how it is. Abe no Saimai, although the mystical silver fox was not sealed by you, but you are really a far-sighted person. Could it be that you predicted that there would be such a catastrophe in Japan in 100 years, so you moved your residence here?" Lu Yi seemed to be full of a kind of unconcealable pride that he was about to succeed. He whispered to himself. When the Japanese passing by saw him whispering to himself, they thought he was a psychopath. After looking at him strangely, they avoided him. Lu Yi didn't mind. While looking at the surrounding scenery, he slowly walked to the Qingming Shrine. In Lu Ye's opinion, compared with many shrines in Japan, Abe no Saimai's burial shrine was extremely small. Next to the shrine, there were even ordinary residential houses. There was only a stone tablet and a stone archway at the entrance of the shrine, with 4 Chinese characters written vertically and horizontally on it. Qingming Shrine. After entering the Qingming Shrine, he saw a very small stone bridge in the courtyard. It was called the Evil Bridge, but it was just a miniature version of the original bridge outside. Beside the miniature bridge, there was even a white screen for tourists to take photos. On the screen there was a scene of Qingming driving ghosts. The face was deliberately circular and hollowed out. Some tourists were gathering behind the screen to show their faces, pretending to be Qingming or a little ghost, to take photos for fun. Compared with some ancient shrines, this shrine, which had existed for nearly 1,000 years, had been renovated. It looked brand new and clean everywhere, without the slightest sense of historical antiquity. On the other hand, there were some snack shops full of classical Japanese flavor, which added a different charm to the shrine. Lu Yi walked to the front of the Qingming Shrine and came to a stone tablet that was placed in the corner. This stone tablet was ordinary, but there was a deep and bright red pentagonal pattern engraved on it. This was also the unique pattern of the Yin-Yang Master, which was used to subdue demons. Lu Yi looked at the bright red pentagonal pattern on the big stone tablet. He laughed in a low voice and said, "Who could have imagined that? In such an inconspicuous place, the strongest 9-tailed celestial fox in thousands of years is sealed?" At this time, behind Lu Yi, some tourists from foreign countries and other places in Japan were still happily taking photos of the various pocket-sized attractions of the Qingming Shrine and pointing at the surrounding scenery. Some vendors and snack shops greeted the guests warmly. The fragrance from the shop wafted out and lingered around the Japanese-style lanterns at the door, revealing a peaceful and festive atmosphere everywhere. But none of them knew that soon in front of them, there would be a demon who had set off a huge wave in both China and Japan. The cultivation world of China and Japan would usher in a bloody storm. Well, I got up early this morning and quickly updated a chapter, because in the afternoon, I have to rush to Nanjing to attend the youth creation meeting of the Jiangsu Writers Association. As a new member, I can't be late, right? The youth creation meeting is scheduled to report on the 23rd. The meeting will be held on the 24th and 25th, and they will return to Suzhou on the 26th. In the next few days, I will try my best to keep updating. If there is any delay, please forgive me. Thank you very much. Chapter 636. Just after Lu Yi arrived at the Qingming Shrine, in the royal courtyard of Mount Koya of Xinyan Tantrism, a battle that shocked the entire Japanese cultivation world was about to begin. Because this battle had been planned by Masako Tachibana and Kaisai Hikaryuni for a long time, and all the famous figures of various sects had gathered together, even the Mikado and his wife were watching from the tall building, it was naturally impossible for this battle to be like a street gangster, and it was also impossible for ordinary cultivators to fight each other without saying a word. Before a battle, Jinyin Tantrism and the Masako family had to hold a long and tedious ritual ceremony. After a group of monks of Jinyin Tantrism finished reciting Buddhist scriptures, Masako Tachibana slowly went to the stage with a bell in one hand and a gold and silver fan in the other. She danced the unique divine music dance of Shintoism in the field. Her daughter, Tachibana Wakako, was also dancing with Masako Tachibana. Both of them were wearing witch costumes with white shirts and red skirts. They had the same long black hair. Because they were going to dance, they did not wear wooden clogs and white cotton socks on their feet. Because Tachibana Wakako was quite precocious, although she was not old, she was not short. Moreover, like her mother, she had long black hair like a waterfall. Therefore, when they stood together, they looked no different from sisters. Although Li Yundong was in the tiger's den, he was not afraid at all. He saw that the monks around him were holding sticks in both hands and beating the drum rhythm with a clear sense of rhythm. Masako Tachibana and Tachibana Wakako were dancing in the drum sound. Even an enemy like Li Yundong had to admit that the dance of the mother and daughter was beautiful and pleasing to the eye. When the Japanese cultivators of various sects saw Li Yundong standing in the field and watching for a while, they simply sat down cross-legged and watched the divine music dance of Masako Tachibana and Tachibana Wakako with great interest. When they saw the place where they were full of interest, they applauded and laughed loudly. They praised them loudly as if they were at home, without the feeling of being in the tiger's den. Although these cultivators had different opinions about Li Yundong's method of hurting people in Mount Koya, they saw that Li Yundong could still be so calm in such a situation, as if there was no one else around. This bearing, calmness, broad-mindedness and courage were really difficult for ordinary people to compare with. They couldn't help but praise him secretly. The middle-aged man from Ise Shinto sighed softly and said, "This person must be one of the best in the Chinese cultivation world. Amazing." Sure enough, Senior Yun has the courage to go to the single-blade meeting alone. He is a true hero. Chu Yun, who had been as cold as ice, also nodded slightly and said, "If his nerves aren't as thick as steel pipes, then he must be a fool." The middle-aged man sighed. "We have to think of a way to save his life. We can't let such a hero fall here." While the two of them were talking, Masako Tachibana and Tachibana Wakako had already finished dancing. They saluted and stepped down from the stage. Although there were many hostile cultivators around, they still applauded politely and praised them loudly. Before stepping down from the stage, Tachibana Wakako quietly glanced at Li Yundong, only to see that he was nodding at her with a smile on his face. His eyes were full of praise as if there had never been any conflict between them. Tachibana Wakako's face turned slightly red, and she couldn't help but take 2 steps forward. After she and Masako Tachibana walked to the backyard below the stage, she turned around and whispered to Masako Tachibana, "Mom, can you?" When the words came to her mouth, she couldn't help but hesitate for a moment. She bit her lips gently with her white teeth as if she didn't know what to say next. Masako Tachibana said coldly, "Do you want to plead for him?" Tachibana Wakako looked at her mother eagerly. "Can't I?" Masako Tachibana snorted coldly and said, "Childish?" After that, she walked into the room in the backyard without looking back. The door seemed to be pushed by a pair of invisible hands and closed automatically with a crash. Tachibana Wakako looked disappointed. She turned her head to look at Li Yundong and sighed secretly. At this time, a soft voice came from beside her. "What's wrong? Is Masako still determined to go her own way?" Tachibana Wakako turned her head and saw Tsuruko Tachibana whispering to her with a worried face. Tachibana Wakako shook her head and said, "Mom is now blinded by anger and can't be persuaded." Tsuruko Tachibana sighed softly and said, "Alas. She always thinks that we are angry with us for helping an outsider, but what she doesn't understand is that we are helping her. Did you tell her that Li Yundong is the reincarnation of Wisdom King?" Tachibana Wakako nodded and said, "Yes." Tsuruko Tachibana said in surprise, "Then she didn't react at all?" Tachibana Wakako's face was full of worry. "She doesn't believe me at all. What can I do? She thinks it's an excuse." Tsuruko Tachibana sighed, shook his head and stopped talking. After waiting on the field for about 10 minutes, Li Yundong saw Kaisai Hikaryoshi come up with a scroll in his hand. After talking for a while in a rhythmic tone, Masako Tachibana slowly came to the field and stood about 10 meters opposite Li Yundong. After Kaisai Hikariyoshi bowed to Li Yundong and Masako Tachibana, he slowly retreated. The cultivators who were talking in low voices around them also quieted down. They knew that an amazing battle was about to begin. Li Yundong saw that the courtyard was suddenly so quiet that he could hear a pin drop. Masako Tachibana stood quietly opposite him, her hands in her sleeves, and her eyes were lowered as if she didn't take Li Yundong seriously at all. The field was extremely quiet. There was only a gust of wind blowing, and a fiery red maple tree in the middle of the courtyard was making a strange rustling sound of leaves. Around Li Yundong, a faint golden light that was visible to the naked eye was slowly released. This golden light surrounded Li Yundong's whole body, making him look like a shining golden Buddha. A strange white light slowly flowed out of Masako Tachibana's long sleeves. This white light enveloped her like smoke, and her figure was looming. Both of them were very cautious at such an important moment, because both of them were great cultivators with extremely high cultivation quotients. Even if there was no one around to watch, once something went wrong, it would be a matter of eternal damnation. What's more, for both Li Yundong and Masako Tachibana, this was a battle that they couldn't afford to lose. They could only win, not lose. It was also because of this that the two of them were in a stalemate in the field, 10 meters away from each other, motionless. Only the junqi in their bodies kept gushing out and extending to each other little by little. The junqi of the two of them was like their tentacles, slowly extending to each other's domain. They probed forward bit by bit, seeming extremely cautious. The surrounding Japanese cultivators of various sects did not feel bored. Instead, they all widened their eyes and watched as the white chi and the golden light slowly approached each other. They all knew that once these two chis came into contact with each other, it would immediately be a stormy sea, and the sky would be filled with wind and clouds. Li Yundong's golden light and Masako Tachibana's white chi were like two snakes of different colors, winding along. When they were about to climb to the maple tree in the middle of the courtyard, Masako Tachibana's white chi suddenly moved. She suddenly shrank back like a poisonous snake about to attack, raised her head, and then shot out like a sharp arrow. When Li Jiandong saw that Masako Tachibana's chi shrank back, he immediately understood his opponent's intention, and suddenly rushed forward without warning. Masako Tachibana's cultivation was originally higher than Li Yundong's, and the fight between masters was only a hair's breadth. Although she shrank back, the sudden burst of speed still gave her the upper hand in an instant. Her chi immediately passed over the maple tree and rushed toward Li Yundong like a raging tide. As soon as her chi passed over the maple tree, the leaves of the maple tree with fiery red leaves instantly turned yellow. The maple leaves withered and even the trunk shrunk, making a creaking sound as if it could not bear the torture of this chi. Because Li Yundong had lost the first opportunity, his golden junqi was surged by Masako Tachibana's chi, which was like a raging wave. He immediately retreated step by step and quickly retreated like an ebbing tide. Although his opponent had taken the initiative, Li Yundong did not panic at all. He saw that the white chi was approaching quickly, especially when it was 2 meters away from him. The white chi suddenly surged up like a huge wave and slammed toward Li Yundong like a tsunami. Everyone could vaguely see countless ghost faces roaring ferociously in the tsunami. Countless dead souls instantly let out earth-shattering roars that shook the heavens and the earth. The cultivators who were familiar with the strength of Masako Tachibana from various sects suddenly changed their expressions and said with awe, "It seems that Masako Tachibana really wants to win this duel. She actually used her unique skill at the beginning." Ever since the Ju family had merged with Jinyin Tantrism, they had been able to dispatch ghosts and gods at will by virtue of their own psychic bloodline and physique. In the whole of Japan, there was no place more concentrated than Jinyin Tantrism. Moreover, the 100,000 ghosts that had accumulated for thousands of years were so terrifying. Each of these faces was the ghost that had been worshipped in Mount Koya for thousands of years. If any of them occupied the edge, they would be turned into dregs and devoured until there was no ash left. With this move alone, Masako Tachibana had defeated countless masters in the cultivation world. Seeing this move, everyone couldn't help looking at Li Jiandong. Many people's eyes had even regarded Li Jiandong as a corpse, because they didn't believe that a Chinese cultivator like Li Jiandong could survive under such a terrifying move. Li Jiandong saw the tsunami-like ghosts pouncing on him. Although there was no threat on his left, right and back, he could dodge this fierce blow if he dodged a little. But Li Jiandong knew that this was Masako Tachibana's trick. Masters could lose the first opportunity in a battle, but they couldn't lose their momentum. Although he had lost the first opportunity, he could still gain the upper hand. But once he lost his momentum, he would be doomed eternally. As the saying goes, the commander of the three armies can be taken away, but an ordinary man can't take away his ambition. That's the truth. You're ruthless, I'm more ruthless than you. You're fierce, I'm fiercer than you. Li Jiandong suddenly opened his eyes and put his palms together. The fingernails of the second ring finger and the second little finger were put together into his palms. The second index finger was attached to the back of the second middle finger, and the thumb was erected, forming the shape of three eyes. In an instant, it formed the light-gathering Buddha's top Mahamudra, which symbolized the light of Tathagata, which could shine through the darkness of all living beings, break through all obstacles, and dispel the ghosts that were difficult to deal with. Li Jiandong glared at the sea of ghosts in front of him, recited the mantra and shouted, Mingyamo, Sanman Duo no Tuanan, Mingling, Diru Luosher, Usanisa, Sahi. This mantra was quickly shouted out, and each word spewed out an extremely powerful Buddhist power. As soon as Li Jiandong's light-gathering Buddha's top Mahamudra was displayed, a flash of golden light shot out from the top of his head. The golden light rushed straight to the sky, and then quickly shot straight from the sky to the ground. In an instant, Li Jiandong and the sea of ghosts in front of him were enveloped in it. When the 100,000 ghosts were shown by the golden light falling from the sky, they immediately wailed and turned into countless black smoke in an instant, scattering and fleeing. When everyone saw that Li Jiandong's shout had easily resolved the killing skill of Masako Tachibana, who had defeated countless masters, they couldn't help but burst into an uproar. They all said in surprise, Mantra Mahamudra? Who the hell is this person? But as soon as they finished speaking, they saw the golden light that had fallen to the ground quickly transform into a solid golden palm, which covered the sky and the earth and slapped toward Masako Tachibana. This palm was like a huge meteorite falling from the sky. It was so fast that there were even raging flames on the side of the palm. The Japanese cultivators on the scene saw that Li Jiandong's palm was terrifying to the extreme, and its power was so strong that it was suffocating. It was as if this palm would turn the courtyard into ashes. They immediately stood up in shock. Although many people had a grudge against Masako Tachibana, this battle was not only a battle between the Xinyan Tantrism and the Chinese cultivators, but also a battle between the Japanese cultivation world and the Chinese cultivation world. If they were knocked to the ground by this Chinese person, it would be a great shame for the entire Japanese cultivation world. They saw that Li Jiandong's palm fell from the sky in the blink of an eye and instantly engulfed Masako Tachibana. They couldn't help but be shocked in their hearts. Masako Tachibana won't be defeated like this, will she? How could this Chinese person be so powerful? Chapter 637. Everyone saw that Masako Tachibana's figure was instantly swallowed up by Li Yundong's light-gathering Buddha top Mahamudra, and then there was a loud bang on the ground. The ground of the royal courtyard was like a carpet that had been shaken hard, and a wave suddenly rose. Even the tourists at the foot of the mountain felt a tremor, as if there was an earthquake. The Japanese reporters at the gate of the royal courtyard of Mount Koya were even more shocked to see the abnormality of the golden light in the sky, and they loudly explained to the camera. At this time, the three monks who had been guarding the door also turned their heads at the same time and looked at the golden light shining down from the sky in surprise. They secretly whispered to each other, guessing the origin of the golden light, and their eyes were full of strong yearning. Su Chan, Ziyuan, and Zhou Qin, who were hiding in the dense forest of Mount Koya, also felt that two powerful auras had already fought. Su Chan raised her head and said nervously, I wonder how Yundong is doing? Sister Ziyuan, hurry up and cast the spell. Ziyuan quickly took out a glass mirror with cracks on its surface from her sleeve. It was the glass mirror of heaven that she had used to help Li Yundong block the terrible heaven's tribulation. Although the glass mirror of heaven had been shattered by the power of the heavenly tribulation and had lost almost all of its magic power, it still had some special abilities, such as the ability to see the surroundings with the help of the caster's power. Ziyuan wiped the mirror with her hand, and the glass mirror of heaven immediately surged with white mist. In the white mist, a somewhat vague picture gradually appeared. It was the scene of Li Yundong and Masako Tachibana fighting. Zhou Qin widened her eyes and said, That's Master. Where's Masako Tachibana? Why didn't I see her? Su Chan said in surprise, Could it be that Yundong has already won? The mantra Mahamudra just now was so powerful. However, Ziyuan shook her head and said, If we can defeat Masako Tachibana in this way, then the Japanese cultivation world will become a big joke. As soon as Ziyuan's voice fell, she saw a burst of rumbling smoke, and the figure of Masako Tachibana gradually appeared. Her whole body was surrounded by boiling white gas, and her long black hair rose into the sky like an upside-down waterfall. Her originally dark eyes also became extremely red. Masako Tachibana was obviously enraged by Li Jiandong's attack. Her angry voice shook the sky. "You're courting death." The voice of Masako Tachibana sounded as if countless people were shouting angrily at the same time. The whole Mount Koya suddenly trembled. Then the colorful clouds in the sky and the Xidigarba Inchi hidden deep in the forest of Mount Koya quickly rushed toward Masako Tachibana, as if she had turned into a huge whirlpool, absorbing the surrounding aura into her body. Soon there were many atomized Masako Tachibana in front of Masako Tachibana. Up, down, left and right they surrounded Li Jiandong densely. Mount Koya was one of the 2 divine mountains in Japan. It was full of spiritual chi of heaven and earth. For thousands of years, it had been influenced by the incense of Jinyan Tantrism, and it was even more spiritual. At this time, Masako Tachibana mobilized the spiritual chi of Mount Koya and the noble spirit of the sky. When these 2 auras gathered together, each of her avatars looked majestic. An aggressive pressure came over her face, which was unstoppable. These Masako Tachibana were holding all kinds of weapons. Some were holding Vajra pestles, some were holding Buddhist staffs, some were holding alms bowls, and some were holding flags, Inyang fan and other powerful magical weapons of Shintoism. In an instant they rushed toward Li Jiandong from all directions. Li Jiandong saw that there were avatars of Masako Tachibana in all directions, and the power of each avatar was no less than that of her real body. He was suddenly shocked and knew that this was one of the characteristics of Jinshin fighting methods. Because Jinshin masters had already comprehended the truth of cultivation and reached the realm of the unity of heaven and man, they had broken through the restrictions of the laws of nature in fighting methods. They could instantly use the power of the 5 elements of heaven and earth and even the power of thunder and lightning. In the blink of an eye, they could form a situation of fighting more than one person and destroy their opponent in an instant with the power of thunder and lightning. If the opponent was not a Jinshin master, or if he had not comprehended the profound meaning of Jinshin fighting methods, they would instantly fall into an extremely passive situation. Even if he had a yang spirit body with 3 heads and 6 arms, he would not be able to resist such a stormy attack. Even if a yang spirit master wanted to fight for his life and directly attack the opponent's real body, because the opponent had a Jinshin body to protect him, his magic and powerful magical weapons might not be able to cause a fatal blow to the opponent. Therefore they could not attack or defend. This was why it was said that even 10 yang spirits could not defeat a Jinshin body. At this time, Li Yundong had already comprehended the mystery of Jinshin fighting methods. His Jinchi surged unhurriedly, and the yang spirit instantly came out of its shell. In an instant, it transformed into countless yang spirit clones, all of which pinched the immovable fundamental seal with their hands. Each of the yang spirits was shining with golden light. It was as if a golden wall had appeared around Li Yundong in an instant, firmly protecting his real body in it. It was impregnable up, down, left, and right. The avatar of Masako Tachibana collided with the avatar of Li Jiandong's eyes like a raging tide. The white aura and the golden aura immediately squeezed into a ball. At this time, countless avatars of Masako Tachibana were crowded together, and their specific figures could not be distinguished at all. Even their facial features and limbs were blurred, as if they had merged into a huge white mass of air, crazily shrinking and squeezing toward Li Jiandong. Li Jiandong only felt that this extremely powerful force was squeezing him, as if it was going to squeeze him into meat sauce. His real body immediately bound his hands outside, his 2 middle fingers were erected and his thumbs were crossed. Like a lotus leaf, he pinched out the most powerful mantra Mahamudra, Amitabha Buddha's fundamental seal. The mantra of the Amitabha Buddha's fundamental seal took a long time to recite, but every time Li Jiandong recited a sentence, the golden light surrounded by the white chi became stronger and stronger. The surrounding cultivators only felt that although the golden light was bound by the white chi, it was like a volcano that was continuing to gather energy and would erupt at any time. Its strength was constantly increasing, and the surrounding white chi was also forced to expand in all directions and could no longer shrink. When Li Jiandong finished reciting the last word of the mantra, there was a sudden bang in front of him, as if a huge bomb had exploded. A strong shock wave quickly spread in all directions. The maple tree in the center of the courtyard, which had become withered, was immediately uprooted by this force. In the blink of an eye, it flew into the sky. But when it was still flying in the air, it was quickly caught up by the shock wave of an aftershock. The two shock waves superimposed and instantly tore the maple tree into pieces. The cultivators of all sects around the courtyard mobilized their jinchi one after another and set up a barrier in front of the house in front of them, blocking the terrible aura in front of them. The white chi of Masako Tachibana was also blown to pieces, but when it was scattered in the air, it quickly changed into the appearance of Masako Tachibana's clone. It glared at Li Jiandong ferociously as if it had not been damaged at all. After Li Jiandong used the Amitabha Buddha's fundamental seal to break Masako Tachibana's attack once again, a white light flashed around his waist, and the Ryoha sword was instantly unsheathed and split into countless Ryoha swords in the air. Li Jiandong's yang spirit suddenly jumped into the air and also turned into countless yang spirit clones. Each of them held a Ryoha sword and fought with the clones of Masako Tachibana. For a time, there was a fight above the royal courtyard. Everyone felt as if a war had broken out in front of them. Countless people were fighting and entangling with each other. After Li Jiandong trapped the opponent's numerous clones with the same move, he pointed his finger, and the Bahuang sword immediately turned into an invincible rotating iron lotus throne, clanging toward Masako Tachibana. At the same time he also made 3 Mahamudra in a row, fiercely sealing off all the directions and corners that Masako Tachibana could dodge in. For a moment, all the cultivators on the scene stood up in shock. They had never expected that apart from taking the lead at the beginning, Masako Tachibana had been suppressed by Li Jiandong all the time. At the moment she was even at a disadvantage. This Chinese cultivator's fighting strength was not only superb, but also fierce and violent. One move after another, it was like a thunderbolt, like layers upon layers of mountains, making people have no time to breathe at all. Even the onlookers felt suffocated, let alone Masako Tachibana, who was on the field, felt it. The middle-aged man of Ise Shinto looked at the field with his mouth agape. He couldn't help but say, how is this possible? Who on earth is this Chinese? Chuyun suddenly straightened his back, and his eyes flashed with a strange light. He stared at Li Jiandong's figure closely and said with a slightly excited expression, "He is much stronger than we imagined." Outside the royal courtyard, there was also a group of stunned spectators. Su Chan, Ziyuan, and Zhou Qin were watching the battle with the help of the sky-reaching glass mirror. At first, when they saw the battle between the two Jinshin, they were so nervous that they didn't even dare to breathe. When Li Jiandong gained the upper hand, they couldn't help but show joy on their faces. Su Chan couldn't help but say happily, "Well, we're going to win." Zhou Qin clenched her fists and said nervously, "Master, hurry up and defeat her." However, there was a hint of worry between Ziyuan's eyebrows. She murmured to herself, "Something's wrong?" Su Chan asked in confusion, "Sister Ziyuan, what's wrong?" Ziyuan hesitated for a moment and said, "Although Li Jiandong seems to have been attacking fiercely, I always feel that he doesn't seem to have any effect." Zhou Qin was shocked. Master can't really be merciful, can he? No. This is like raising a tiger to cause trouble." Su Chan's eyes widened. What is Yundong thinking? Why should we be polite to this Japanese devil? Hurry up and defeat her. Ziyuan thought for a while and said, "No, Li Jiandong seems to have used all his strength, but Masako Tachibana doesn't seem to have used all her strength. Look, although she is being suppressed by Li Jiandong at this time, she is not in a mess at all, as if she is looking for the bottom line of Li Jiandong's real strength." Not long after Ziyuan's voice fell, she saw Li Jiandong attack like a storm. Masako Tachibana suddenly stopped. Her eyebrows were raised, her eyes were murderous, and she said with a ferocious face, "Have you had enough? If that's all you have, today will be your end." After that, countless clones around her gathered together to form a huge cloud statue. Then, countless bodhisattvas and Buddhas on Mount Koya began to shake. Beams of golden light soared into the sky, gathered in a constantly rolling cloud in the sky, and then cast on Masako Tachibana together. In an instant, Masako Tachibana's indomitable cloud statue was shining with golden light, and her whole body seemed to be surrounded by flames. She held a huge golden long sword in her hand, raised it high, and then slashed down heavily on Li Jiandong's head. Seeing this sword, Zhou Qin couldn't help exclaiming, "Master, hide." Ziyuan and Su Chan also cried out at the same time, "Vajra wisdom sword?" He had been in a meeting in the morning. As soon as he finished lunch at 12 o'clock, he immediately wrote a chapter and sent it up. He was tired and sleepy. He went to take a nap first. In the afternoon he would continue the meeting. Chapter 638. Faith is a kind of power. When the believers of Tibetan Buddhism faced the Buddha Randeng, they devoutly lit their little fingers, burned their fingers to worship the Buddha, and burned their little fingers. In this process they endured the pain that ordinary people could not bear, but their faces were full of happiness. Self-destruction and self-abuse, just to worship the God, this is the power of faith. In the extremely poor families, they were in a precarious situation, and even the next meal was about to starve to death, but the devout believers still respectfully offered the life-saving dry food in front of the Buddha. Even if they starved to death, they still had to worship the Buddha. Sacrifice life and death just to worship the Buddha, this is the power of faith. For thousands of years, the gods and Buddhas of Xinyan Tantrism had enjoyed such devout faith and worship. The spiritual power condensed by countless believers was wrapped around this divine mountain, which had long formed an incomparably huge and amazing power of gods and Buddhas. This was the source of Masako Tachibana's strength. At this time she held the Vajra wisdom sword in her hand and chopped down. The long sword was filled with the powerful and terrifying power of faith of Mount Koya for thousands of years. This force almost tore the sky apart, and in an instant Mount Koya became covered with dark clouds, as if it was hanging over people's heads. The dark sky would fall and collapse at any time. This dark cloud almost covered the whole sky, so that most of the cloud body of Masako Tachibana was covered. The Japanese reporters who had been doing live reports at the gate of the royal courtyard saw the dark clouds rolling over their heads, but this dark cloud was quickly torn apart by a dazzling golden light. Although they didn't know what had happened, they knew that this must be the abnormality caused by the fighting in the courtyard. For a moment, they were stunned and looked at the scene on the field in a daze, unable to say a word. When Ziyuan and Su Chan saw Masako Tachibana's sword coming down, they were so scared that their hearts were in suspense. When Zhou Qin heard their shouts, he couldn't help but say in surprise, "Vajra Wisdom Sword. Is this the sword of the immovable Wisdom King?" Ziyuan stared at the glass mirror of heaven with a nervous face. Her fingers unconsciously clenched, and her knuckles were a little white, but she didn't know it. She said, "Masako Tachibana is serious. She has already used the power of faith of Xinyan Tantrism. This power is the power of the immovable Wisdom King, the main god worshipped by Mount Koya." Zhou Qin couldn't help but ask, "But, isn't Master the reincarnation of the immovable Wisdom King?" This question stunned both Su Chan and Ziyuan. They raised their heads at the same time, one with a face full of surprise, the other with a thoughtful look. Su Chan laughed with ecstasy. "Yes, how could I forget about this? It's okay if Masako Tachibana doesn't use the power of the immovable Wisdom King, but she uses the power of faith of the immovable Wisdom King to deal with the reincarnated Wisdom King. Isn't this asking for trouble? Aha, this is going to be a good show." The more the little girl spoke, the more excited she became. The worry between her eyebrows was swept away, and her two glasses narrowed into a line as she smiled, her face full of pride. Although Ziyuan's eyebrows were also full of unconcealable joy, she still said cautiously, "Don't be careless. Let's see what happens first." When the cultivators of various sects who were watching the battle saw the Vajra wisdom sword with their own eyes, their faces immediately became serious and their expressions hid fear. Many of them were defeated by Masako Tachibana's Vajra wisdom sword. But Masako Tachibana's sword smashed toward Li Yundong. Although there was a loud bang, the tip of the sword stopped 3 inches away from the top of Li Yundong's head, so it could not fall any more. Masako Tachibana was stunned, but then she became furious. She raised the huge sword in her hand again and chopped it down hard. The power of this sword was even greater than before. The long sword almost cut through the air. When the edge of the cloud sword rubbed against the air, it made a thunderous roar, which was so terrifying that it was suffocating. But this sword still fell 3 inches above Li Yundong's head again, and it could no longer move forward. No matter how angry Masako Tachibana was, the bat in front of Li Yundong seemed to have an invisible wall, forcibly blocking the terrible Vajra wisdom sword in front of him. Masako Tachibana was shocked and angry. "This is impossible. The immovable Wisdom King's intellectual sword could sever everything in the world. Even if it was a flowing river with a single slash, the river would flow backwards, the raging waves would freeze. Even if it was the world's most unresolvable and chaotic strands of emotion, with a single slash of the intellectual sword, it could completely sever all love and hatred." Masako Tachibana had been in Japan for more than 10 years. There had never been anything that she could not cut off under the wisdom sword. How could she not even cut off the head of this young boy? Masako Tachibana was so angry that she shouted. In an instant, all the immovable Wisdom King dojo, statues, stone statues, Buddhist shrines, and even the lantern lampstands with the image of the immovable Wisdom King in the whole Mount Koya began to jump as if they were alive. Streams of white light gathered toward Masako Tachibana. Masako Tachibana's cloud body gradually condensed and turned into a raging Vajra surrounded by flames. This Vajra stared at everything in front of him. As the incarnation of Buddha's anger, as soon as he appeared in the world, he made people feel a terrifying aura of anger coming on their faces. The blue flame burning behind the immovable Wisdom King was like a sea of hellfire, vowing to burn everything in the world. There was a sea of blue fire boiling in the sky. In the eyes of the world, half of the sky on Mount Koya had turned a strange dark blue, and the surrounding air had become scorching hot. The leaves on Mount Koya withered quickly, as if they were being burned by the terrible high temperature and were losing water rapidly. This blue flame quickly spread in all directions, and soon the whole sky turned into a blue sea of fire. Only the immovable Wisdom King stood in this sea of fire. His whole body was dark green. The Wisdom King showed ferocious teeth on both sides of his mouth, and his face was twisted with anger. He was bare-armed, his coat was tilted, and he was wearing a skirt. In his hand he was holding the Vajra wisdom sword that Masako Tachibana had held before. He was raising the wisdom sword in his hand bit by bit, as if he would swing the sword down in the next second and completely destroy the world. In the royal courtyard, some of the cultivators with poor willpower had already stood up in fear. They wished they could run away as far as possible. Some of the cultivators who had been defeated in the hands of Masako Tachibana turned pale, and their eyes showed fear that they could not bear to look back. The middle-aged man of Ayase Shinto looked at the immovable Wisdom King summoned by Masako Tachibana in horror. He said in a hoarse voice, "Immovable Wisdom King, the king of all Wisdom Kings, the head of all Wisdom Kings. I haven't seen him for a long time." Chuyun, who had been expressionless all the time, also looked at the immovable Wisdom King, whose power was enough to destroy the world, in horror. She said in a low voice, "Is this the power of the immovable Wisdom King? It's really powerful, really powerful. No wonder you told me since I was a child that Masako Tachibana was invincible in Mount Koya. It turns out that it's true." At this time, Masako Tachibana took out the immovable Wisdom King, and the rolling dark clouds in the sky were also burned away by the blue flames of the immovable Wisdom King. The people of Mount Koya looked up at the angry Wisdom King in the sky with their mouths agape. They didn't move at all, as if they had been scared out of their wits. Especially when the wisdom sword in the immovable Wisdom King's hand was raised to the highest point above his head, time seemed to stop moving, and the air became frozen. Then, the Vajra wisdom sword in the immovable Wisdom King's hand suddenly chopped down. There was no need for any fancy tricks, no need for any magical treasures. Akalanatha was the embodiment of Buddha's wrath. His power had already surpassed everything. He no longer needed these fancy things to display his unparalleled power. This ordinary sword chopped down, but it had already surpassed all the previous dangerous fighting methods. When the people of Mount Koya saw the sword chopping down, an idea suddenly jumped out of their minds. It's over, this world is going to be destroyed by Buddha. No one knew who was the first to let out a heart-wrenching cry. All of a sudden, almost all the people in the world screamed and ran away crazily, like small animals fleeing in all directions before the disaster came. At this time, Masako Tachibana had completely lost her mind. For the sake of the victory in front of her, she had forgotten everything. In her mind there was only one thought: I can't lose, immovable Wisdom King. Help me destroy the guy in front of me who is blocking my way. Masako Tachibana watched the terrifying wisdom sword fall toward Li Yundong. His figure was instantly swallowed up by the huge wisdom sword. At this moment she was so happy that she raised her head and laughed loudly. This burst of laughter was full of arrogance and unruliness. Coupled with the fact that Li Yundong's position had been instantly swallowed up by a blue flame, it highlighted Masako Tachibana's superior posture and pride as the winner. Su Chan, Ziyuan, and Zhou Qin looked at the scene in the glass mirror of heaven and were stunned. The three of them were speechless for a while. After a long time, Zhou Qin suddenly said angrily, "This is impossible." The little girl was also shocked. For some reason her tears fell involuntarily. She said blankly, "Impossible, Yundong, he can't be like this." In the end, the two ominous words were on the tip of the little girl's tongue, but she couldn't say them out loud no matter how hard she tried. Ziyuan didn't say a word. She bit her lips tightly with her snow-white teeth, and her whole body was trembling. The fairy, who was usually very calm, seemed to have her spine taken away in an instant. Her whole body became light and she couldn't even stand still. Although some cultivators of various sects in the Japanese cultivation world were very sympathetic and appreciative of Li Yundong, this battle involved the cultivation world of China and Japan. In any case, the Japanese cultivation world could not afford to lose. Therefore, the moment they saw Li Yundong being swallowed up by the flames, many people couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Some sects that were very close to Xinyan Tantrism even cheered. The 3 monks who had been guarding the gate of the royal courtyard also noticed the outcome from the changes in the sky and the aura in the courtyard. They couldn't help cheering. The Japanese reporters who had always disliked Li Yundong's high-profile behavior, saw them cheering and also clapped their hands to celebrate. But just as these Japanese people were celebrating, a soft sneer suddenly came from the boiling blue flame. Although this voice was soft, it was clearly heard by everyone in the fighting field of the royal courtyard. They only heard the voice say in a sarcastic tone, "You Japanese like to read the romance of the 3 kingdoms very much, but haven't you read the water margin?" As he spoke, a man slowly walked out from within the blue flames. He had an imposing appearance and was completely unharmed. It was Li Yundong. Chapter 639. The blue flame burning around the immovable Wisdom King was the manifestation of the angry power of Buddha. This power was extremely terrible, enough to be compared with the Samadhi true fire of Taoism, which could burn everything. When Masako Tachibana saw the blue flame devouring Li Yundong, she couldn't help laughing wildly. This difficult and hateful opponent finally disappeared in front of her. But what Masako Tachibana never expected was that in less than half a minute, Li Yundong walked out of the terrible flame unscathed. Not only was he unscathed, but the handmade silk tang suit on his body did not even show any sign of being burned, as if the flame was just the decorative background around him. Masako Tachibana was stunned by the scene in front of her. Her mind buzzed and she shouted in a hoarse voice, "This is impossible. This is absolutely impossible. Who the hell are you?" Li Jiandong did not answer Masako Tachibana. He just looked coldly at the patriarch of the Tachibana family in front of him. His eyes were full of mockery, as if the real master had seen a fake swindling outside in his name. Li Yundong raised one hand and waved it. The blue flame around him quickly rushed into his palm like rivers returning to the sea. The blue flame boiling in the sky and the flame around him quickly gathered in his palm and rotated quickly. Every time it rotated, it was compressed. Soon the sky was as clear as before, and all the blue flame was compressed into a fist-sized blue fireball by Li Yundong. The density and strength of this fireball were incredibly high. It looked like a burning blue glass ball, and the ripples of the flame could be clearly seen flowing and boiling inside. Although it was already very shocking to be able to control the flame all over the sky freely, what did it mean to be able to compress the flame of Wisdom King into such a small ball? But for this point, very few people on the scene thought about it for a while. They had a more serious and terrifying problem to worry about. The cultivators of all the sects in Japan looked at the blue flame in Li Yundong's palm with fear in their eyes. They knew that the flame seemed to have become smaller, but its power was far more terrifying than the sea of fire that had filled the sky just now. Originally, flames would only burn and scorch everything it came into contact with, but this fireball was compressed from a sea of fire that filled the sky, and it had a terrifying explosive power. It could even be said that this blue fireball was equivalent to the power of 10 atomic bombs. If it was detonated by Li Yundong, Mount Koya would be razed to the ground, and a huge sinkhole would appear in Wakayama Prefecture, Japan. Based on the special geographical structure of the island country of Japan, once this blue fireball exploded, not only would Wakayama Prefecture be finished, but the continental shelf of Japan would also be shaken to the point of ushering in an even more terrifying earthquake and tsunami. This would be the end of the Japanese nation. All the cultivators of all the sects in Japan stared at the blue fireball in Li Yundong's hand nervously. They didn't even dare to breathe. Even the middle-aged man of Ayase Shinto and Chuyun, who had admired Li Yundong before, stood up nervously at this time. They were surrounded by Jinshi and took out their powerful magical weapons. Their eyes seemed to be about to shoot out sharp blades as they stared at Li Yundong. As long as he had the slightest intention of detonating the blue fireball, they would attack at all costs. They were powerful cultivators and could escape from such a terrifying explosion by all kinds of means, but His Majesty the Mikado and his wife could not. There were countless ordinary people in Japan here. They could not. At this time, even the most arrogant Japanese cultivators did not dare to scold Li Yundong. They glared at Li Yundong and wanted to kill him in an instant, but they did not dare to speak at all. They were afraid that they would provoke this guy and detonate the fireball. Then Japan would disappear from this world. For a moment, the scene was extremely quiet. The cultivators of all the sects in Japan were sweating profusely and motionless like stone sculptures. Fortunately, Li Yundong did not intend to destroy Japan. The blue fireball in his hand became smaller and smaller, and finally, it slowly became so small that it could not be seen. Then, with a buzzing sound, a blue ripple burst out in the air and continued to spread in all directions. It was like a blue light wave spectrum, which was very beautiful. Li Yundong also knew that it would not do him any good to detonate this blue fireball. This fireball was enough to kill millions of secular people. Although he did not like Japan and hated its wolf-like nature, what had these people done? To say the least, if a cultivator killed an ordinary secular person, he would provoke a terrible divine tribulation. What about killing a million secular people? What kind of terrible tribulation would befall him? Not to mention that he was the reincarnation of Wisdom King. Even if the real Buddha appeared, he would be taken away by God, wouldn't he? Moreover, among the cultivators of all sects on the scene, there were definitely many top experts. Many of their real cultivation was far above that of Masako Tachibana. However, Masako Tachibana could use the powerful power of faith so she could defeat them. It was easy for these people to escape the range of the flame bomb. If he destroyed Japan, wouldn't they go back to take revenge? This kind of result was not what Li Yundong wanted to see. If it really happened, it would be a terrible war in the cultivation world of China and Japan, and it would even directly lead to the complete destruction of the cultivation world of China and Japan. After Li Yundong made the blue fireball in his hand disappear, the cultivators of all sects around him let out a long sigh of relief. A gust of wind blew, and some people felt that they were all wet, as if they had just been fished out of the water. The middle-aged man of Ayase Shinto couldn't help wiping the sweat on his forehead. He said with a look of relief and fear, "It was so dangerous, so dangerous." Chuyun also slightly loosened his clenched fists and secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, he is not a lunatic. However, Masako Tachibana didn't seem to feel the danger just now. She still looked at Li Yundong in disbelief and shouted as if she had lost her mind, "Who the hell are you?" Li Yundong smiled slightly and raised his other hand. At this time, the blue-black immovable Wisdom King in the sky instantly turned into countless tiny white lights and instantly broke down. One by one, thousands of strands flowed into Li Yundong's body. As soon as this force entered Li Yundong's body, his whole body burst out with a dazzling white light. A crack appeared between his eyebrows with a tearing sound. The crack slowly elongated, and a majestic and cold vertical pupil appeared. Then Li Yundong's bones cracked, and 2 heads and 4 arms quickly grew out from his shoulders and back. He became an angry Wisdom King with 3 heads and 6 arms, who was more than 2 meters tall. At this moment, even Su Chan, Ziyuan, Zhou Qin, and the others who had seen this scene through the glass mirror of heaven, could not tell whether Li Yundong's physical body had directly transformed into the Dharmakaya of Wisdom King, or whether his yang spirit body had transformed into such a way to shroud his physical body. When everyone saw Li Yundong's appearance at this time, they were so shocked that they shouted, "This is Wisdom King Tianzuan. Immovable Wisdom King. This is impossible." Masako Tachibana's head was buzzing. She suddenly remembered what her daughter had said to her very seriously, "Mom, this Li Yundong is the reincarnation of Wisdom King. You must not use the power of immovable Wisdom King to fight with him." At that time, Masako Tachibana scoffed at this statement and didn't believe it at all. It was like a person squandering an ownerless treasure for more than 10 years. He had subconsciously regarded this treasure as his own exclusive property. Suddenly, one day someone came to her and told her that this treasure belonged to another person. How could she believe it? Even if she believed it, how could she be willing to admit it? Masako Tachibana was sweating all over, and beads of sweat rolled down her forehead. She subconsciously murmured, "Impossible, this is absolutely impossible." But her body was trembling under the pressure of Akalanatha. Trembling, her feet retreated step by step, as if she wanted to escape from this terrible place. At this time, Masako Tachibana regretted it to the extreme. If she didn't use the power of immovable Wisdom King, she might not be able to defeat Li Yundong. But she was too eager for quick success and instant benefits. She wanted to defeat her opponent in one fell swoop and deter the hostile sects that were eyeing her covetously and ambitious. That was why she mobilized the power of immovable Wisdom King. The power of the immovable Wisdom King was stored in the various statues and shrines of Mount Koya in the form of a seal. Without the call of Masako Tachibana's special bloodline power, they would never wake up and would never be used by outsiders. Even if Li Yundong was the reincarnation of immovable wisdom king, it was impossible for him to mobilize this power in Mount Koya. It was better not to use this power. Once he used it, it was equivalent to giving the other party a big gift. Li Yundong's strength had increased exponentially, and the power of his Fazhen had increased to a level that no one dared to look directly at. Li Yundong slowly raised the Vajra sword in his hand. Although this sword was much smaller than the huge sword held by Masako Tachibana before, the condensed sharpness was like a substance and its power was greater. When the sword in Li Yundong's hand was raised to the highest point, he suddenly shouted and slashed at Masako Tachibana. At this moment, Masako Tachibana only felt that the sky above her head suddenly darkened, and an extremely terrible force pounced on her. She couldn't move at all, not even a little finger. The only thing she could do was to watch as the sword slashed down on her head, and then let out a heart-wrenching scream. Just as the sword in Li Yundong's hand was about to fall on Masako Tachibana's head, a figure suddenly rushed out of the field and shouted, "Don't kill her." Li Yundong took a closer look and saw that Tachibana Wakako's thin body was standing in front of her mother. Her body was trembling slightly, and her trembling legs betrayed her heart full of fear. However, she bit her lips tightly, and there was a firm light in her eyes. The long sword in Li Yundong's hand stopped at the top of Tachibana Wakako's head in an instant. He said in a cold voice, "Give me a reason not to kill her." Tachibana Wakako's young and immature face was full of stubbornness. Her voice trembled slightly, but she still said loudly and forcefully, "Heaven has the virtue of cherishing life. Who doesn't make mistakes all his life?" Almost all the cultivators present were moved by this sentence. Even Kaisai Hikaryuni couldn't help but sigh. Amit ba. As for whether he was sighing at the failure of Jinyan Tantrism or the wisdom of Tachibana Wakako, no one knew. Li Yundong was silent for a long time. The long sword in his hand slowly disappeared, and his figure slowly changed back to the original appearance of the man in the tang suit. He suddenly smiled and said to Masako Tachibana, "Your daughter understands more than you do. You've lived for more than 10 years in vain." When Masako Tachibana heard Li Yundong's words, his voice kept echoing in her mind. There was a blank and indignant voice in her heart that kept shouting, "Is it wrong for me to work hard for more than 10 years? What was wrong with me? What was wrong with me?" Masako Tachibana thought of what she had boasted in front of everyone, of the plan she had carefully arranged before, and of the miserable situation in front of everyone now. She couldn't help feeling ashamed and angry at the same time. A stream of hot air rushed up from her dantian. She was so angry that her chi and blood were in a mess. She spat out a mouthful of blood and fell down on her back. Tachibana Wakako let out a cry of surprise. She turned around and hugged Masako Tachibana, who had collapsed on the ground. The middle-aged man of Ise Shinto looked at Masako Tachibana and shook his head. The era of Masako Tachibana is over. The Japanese cultivation world will usher in the era of hegemony again. Chuyun looked at Li Yundong with a complicated look in her eyes. It was hard to tell whether it was admiration or fear. She asked in a low voice, "What about him?" The middle-aged man looked at Li Yundong, only to see that Li Yundong did not look at Masako Tachibana and the others. He turned around, dusted off the dust on his body and was about to leave. He couldn't help but whisper, "This Chinese man defeated Masako Tachibana. If this gets out." Previously he had thought that Li Yundong was a weak hero, so he had a pity for him. But at this time, the other party had defeated Masako Tachibana. The nature of the whole thing had changed. Not only did he think of this idea, but the cultivators of other Japanese cultivation sects also thought of it. Behind Li Yundong, a few loud shouts rang out at the same time, "You can't go. Chinaman, stop right there. Do you want to leave after hurting someone?" When Li Yundong heard the voice, he turned around. His expression did not change at all, but his eyes were full of contempt and disdain. At this time, Ziyuan, who was hiding in the woods outside the royal courtyard of Mount Koya, raised her head. She quickly wiped the Tongtian glass mirror with her hand and hid the powerful magical weapon on her body. She said, "It's time for us to play." At this time in Kyoto, Japan, a demon-sealing war was taking place in the downtown area. Sorry, I was too tired at noon, so I didn't have time to update. I'll try to update a chapter in the evening. The next chapter is the appearance of the black fox. Chapter 640. In the Qingming Shrine in the Shangjing district of Kyoto, Japan, Lu Yi was standing in front of an inconspicuous stone platform. He reached out and stroked the bright red five-pointed star rune on the stone platform. Just as he gently stroked it for a while, he heard an old voice behind him saying in Japanese, "I'm sorry, you can't touch this thing with your hands like this." Lu Yi didn't look back. He said in Japanese with a strong Kanto accent, "Is that so? Are you afraid that I will release the monster sealed in this stone?" With that, Lu Yi turned around and smiled slightly. The smile on his face was so kind that it was almost harmless. Standing in front of Lu Yi was a short old man. He was about 1.6 meters tall and was wearing the most ordinary brown Japanese men's kimono. The old man's eyebrows were white and long, and the skin on his face was so old that it was like a crisscrossed ravine. He looked like he was more than 100 years old. He was slightly hunched, leaning on a cane with one hand behind his back. He also looked at Lu Yi with a smile on his face. After the old man took a serious look at Lu Yi, he laughed and said, "You're from Kanto, aren't you? From your accent, it seems that you're from there. This stone doesn't have any monsters sealed in it. You might have heard some strange stories from somewhere, right?" Lu Yi laughed and said, "Really? But why did I hear that Tamamo no Mei was sealed here?" A sharp light flashed through the old man's dim yellow eyes, but it was only for a moment. He quickly smiled and said, "You're wrong. Tamamo no Mei was sealed in the Stone of Slaughter. Moreover, as early as the Muromachi era, Monk Xianwang used heavenly thunder to split the stone into two pieces. Although the Stone of Slaughter was still there, Tamamo no Mei's soul had long been destroyed by Monk Xianwang. Haha, even the children know this story." Lu Yi also laughed with the old man. He said with a smile, "Really? But I didn't find any traces of lightning on the Stone of Slaughter when I was in Nasu Town, Azuki Prefecture, Kanto." The old man laughed and said, "Nearly 1,000 years have passed. How can we still find these traces?" Lu Yi shook his head and said with a smile, "That's not necessarily true. If you want to destroy the soul of the mystical silver fox, it's useless to use ordinary heavenly thunder. Only the most powerful nine-heaven god night thunder can destroy her soul. Once the nine heavens heavenly night thunder falls, let alone a stone, even the mountains, rivers, and seas will be turned into ashes. How can there still be a Stone of Slaughter?" The old man's eyes narrowed slightly. The smile on his face didn't change, but his voice slowly turned cold. He said word by word, "Who are you?" Lu Yi sighed softly. Instead, he turned sideways and reached out to gently stroke the five-pointed star rune on the stone platform. He sighed in a low voice, "I also thought that the soul of the mystical silver fox was locked in the killing stone, so I secretly visited it in Guangdong for a long time. But I found that the killing stone was just an ordinary stone, but there was always a faint aura of the fox demon near this stone. So I understood at that time that the mystical silver fox was indeed sealed there, but because the mystical silver fox still had powerful demonic power when she was sealed, any creature that approached her would be sucked out of her life to restore her spiritual energy." Lu Yi continued with a smile, "Because of this, the Japanese cultivation world knows that they can no longer ignore the killing stone like this. If they don't do this, sooner or later the mystical silver fox will absorb enough life and recover its strength to break out of the stone. Therefore you came up with a way to replace the dead. You asked Monk Xianwang to come forward and split a stone without the soul of the mystical silver fox with heavenly thunder. Then, you replaced the stone that was split with the stone that sealed the mystical silver fox with heavenly thunder. That is the stone in front of me." As he said this, Lu Yi turned his head to look at the old man behind him. "Am I right? Lord Su Qian of the Earth Imperial Sect? Or should I call you Lord Su Qian of Abe?" Su Qian's face was extremely serious. He stared at Lu Yi like lightning and said slowly, "Which sect are you from? Why did you come here to say such a thing? Since you know this, you should know that this stone is an ominous thing. You should leave." Lu Yi chuckled and said, "Is it really an ominous thing?" Su Qian saw that Lu Yi spoke in an authentic Kanto accent, and his manner and words were no different from those of the Japanese. The Kanto sect in the Japanese cultivation world was a very famous force. In the battle to encircle and suppress the mystical silver fox, the Kanto sect was the cultivator who rushed to the front. Although Lu Ye's words were a little strange and he even knew the real origin of Tamamo no Mei, it could be seen that he should be a cultivator with a very strong background. Therefore, Su Qian had the preconceived idea that Lu Yi was a cultivator from the Kanto area of Japan. Everyone in Japan knew about Tamamo no Mei, and Tamamo no Mei was a well-known name in the Japanese cultivation world. However, very few cultivators knew that Tamamo no Mei was the mystical silver fox. Only the Japanese cultivation sects that had participated in the encirclement and suppression knew about this extremely secret matter. In the era of the Emperor of Tobarama, the mystical silver fox had hidden beside the emperor in the name of Tamamo no Mae. Later, she had been discovered by Yasuhiro Abe. In a rage, the Emperor of Tobarama had sent his favorite generals, Miura Jie Yoshiaki, Ueda Tsukirosho, and the strongest Onmyoji in Japan at that time. Yasuhiro Abe had organized 80,000 troops to encircle and suppress the mystical silver fox. This battle had been recorded in the history of Japan. It was unprecedented and unprecedented. Even in a large-scale battle in Japan, there were very few battles with close to 100,000 people. However, these 80,000 elite soldiers had been used to encircle and suppress a mystical silver fox with only one soul and two spirits left. It could be said that in the history of Japan, no demon had ever been able to enjoy such treatment. It was also because of this battle that Tamamo no Mae's great reputation shook the Japanese court and was spread to the world. Since then, the name of the mystical silver fox had been changed in the cultivation world of Japan. In Abe Tsuchien's opinion, since Lu Yi knew about it and spoke Japanese so fluently, he must be the descendant of a big cultivation family in Japan. After learning about the whereabouts of the mystical silver fox, he came to see what was going on out of curiosity. It was not the first time that this kind of thing had happened. However, Abe Tsuchien didn't know that Lu Yi was the junior of the mystical silver fox, and he was also a terrifying eight-tailed fox. After Lu Yi had cultivated to the eight-tailed fox, his demon chi had been completely restrained. He was no different from ordinary people. Therefore, even Abe Tsuchien, who had a high cultivation, couldn't see Lu Yi's true identity. Abe Tsuchien said with a serious face, "Why isn't it an ominous thing? When the mystical silver fox was sealed in this stone, any creature that approached her would be sucked to death by her." Later, several generations of our Abe family sacrificed their lives to make this magic sealing rune, which completely sealed her in this place. Our Abe family has been guarding this place for more than 30 generations. I advise you to stay away from it. Lu Yi looked at the stone in front of him with pity and sympathy. The Junchi in his body began to flow quietly. He pressed his finger on the five-pointed star rune and suddenly said in surprise, "Ah, there is a crack here." Abe Tsuchien was stunned and couldn't help scolding, "Nonsense. This rune has an extremely strong demon sealing power. How could there be a crack?" However, Lu Yi said, "You don't believe me? Then come and see for yourself." After that, he stepped aside. Abe Tsuchien took a closer look at Lu Yi and took a few steps forward doubtfully. He took a closer look and saw that the stone platform was undamaged. There was no crack. Abe Tsuchien was stunned, and soon he felt a strong wind coming from behind him. The pores on his back suddenly exploded and a creepy feeling came quickly. Abe Tsuchien subconsciously dodged to the side, but he didn't expect that he would dodge this attack. Soon the other party followed him like a shadow. Abe Tsuchien saw a vast expanse of white in front of him. A huge white object swept toward him, and his body was immediately swept away. As an old man of the Abe family, Abe Tsuchien was not an Onmyoji who was very good at fighting. Two of the strongest people of the Abe family were in Tokyo, and the other two were in Mount Koya. Abe Tsuchien was the weakest one who stayed behind. Although he knew the importance of this stone platform, no matter how important it was, after guarding it for nearly 1,000 years, his vigilance would always drop. Besides, who dared to be presumptuous near Mount Harui? Who dared to be presumptuous in the Qingming Divine Club? The Abe family, who had guarded this sealing stone for nearly 1,000 years, did not expect that someone would take advantage of this time. In addition, Lu Yi had carefully prepared and imitated the accent and behavior of the Kanto people vividly, which made Abe Tsuchien have a preconceived idea. This time Lu Yi suddenly launched a sneak attack. How could he not succeed? Abe Tsuchien's body was smashed out fiercely. His thin and weak body slammed into a traditional restaurant. His body was like a cannonball and the curtain at the door fluttered. There was a burst of clanging and shouting in the room. But soon, Abe Tsuchien rushed back from inside in an instant, surrounded by a black aura. Blood spilled from the corner of his mouth. He stared at Lu Yi in front of him angrily and shouted, "Who the hell are you?" A deep laugh came from Lu Yi's throat. As he chuckled, huge snow-white tails grew out of his back one after another. The fur of these white tails was smooth, reflecting a strange and enchanting beauty in the light. Abe Tsuchien's pupils shrank sharply. Nine-tailed fox spirit. The nine-tailed fox spirit was so famous in the Japanese cultivation world that when Abe Tsuchien saw the fox tail behind Lu Yi, the first thought that came to his mind was this. But he soon found that there were only 8 tails behind this fox spirit. Fortunately, it's not a 9-tailed fox spirit. Abe Su-chien was a little relieved. He quickly looked around, only to see that the tourists near the Qingming Shrine, as well as the owners and employees of the traditional restaurant, were all shocked by the scene in front of them. They stood there in a daze as if they were scared silly. They couldn't come to their senses for a long time. Abe Su-chien shouted, "Run! What are you waiting for?" As soon as he finished speaking, the tail behind Lu Yi swept fiercely. Once again Abe Su-chien, who was distracted, was swept away. This time his body hit the wall heavily, making a big hole in the wall. Lu Yi glanced at Abe Su-chien with disdain and snorted coldly, "Watch this moment." As he said this, he turned around, turned his hand, and slapped the stone platform in front of him, which was deeply engraved with red 5-pointed star runes. "Stop." Just as Lu Ye's palm was about to fall, Abe Su-chien endured the sharp pain, propped up his body in the ruins, and quickly threw a 5-pointed star rune at Lu Yi. The 5-pointed star rune quickly turned into a ferocious shiki in the air. It had a single horn on its head and fangs in its mouth. It pounced on Lu Yi with a ferocious face. Lu Yi turned around and glanced at the shikigami. His gaze was condescending and full of sarcasm and mockery. "You want to stop me with just this?" After saying that, white fox fur quickly grew out of his body, and he instantly revealed his true form. Lu Ye's true body was more than 3 meters tall. He glared at the shikigami in front of him like a giant beast. He opened his mouth and let out a ferocious roar. With a howl of rage, the shikigami was shattered into pieces by the impact of the sound waves alone. Even Abe and Su-chien were sent flying again. At this time no one could stop Lu Yi anymore. He turned around and stepped heavily on the stone platform. With a loud bang, a crack appeared on the stone platform. With a crack, a faint golden aura quickly leaked out of the 5-pointed star rune. Soon, this golden aura surged out and gradually turned into a huge, irregular, mist-like gas floating in the air. Thousands of soldiers were shouting and rushing toward the top of the mountain like a tide. Wearing the armor of a Japanese general, Miura Jie Yoshiaki and Ueda Jie Hiroshi were calmly commanding the army from the rear. Countless Japanese cultivators rushed toward a delicate figure one after another. The famous Onmyoji of Japan, Abe Yasukin, was quickly chanting an incantation and drawing 5-pointed star runes. These pictures flashed quickly like a lantern until they finally froze into a picture. In this image, a woman radiating golden light stood in the middle of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. This woman's back was facing the image, and behind her were 9 extremely long golden foxtails. Each foxtail was soaked in a sea of blood. Countless Japanese samurai who had already died were holding samurai swords full of runes and stabbing into her foxtails, forcibly nailing her to the ground. This woman had been hit by countless sharp arrows, and her body was entangled by the dense dead Japanese warriors. Facing the tide-like enemies and the masters of the Japanese cultivation world, she still let out an unyielding and earth-shattering roar. "I'm the mystical silver fox. Who can stop me?" With a loud bang, the picture was shattered in an instant and the golden powder scattered. Only a clear shout echoed in the sky above Jingdu, Japan, "I'm the mystical silver fox. Who can stop me?" At this moment, many Japanese in Jingdu heard this voice, but this voice was in Chinese. Naturally, they couldn't understand it. Even if there were people who could understand Chinese, they were also like the pedestrians around them. They raised their heads in a daze and looked at the sky, not knowing what had happened. Abe Su-chien couldn't help trembling all over. With a face full of fear and despair, he said in a trembling voice, "God. The mystical silver fox has been reborn." Chapter 641. The voice of the mystical silver fox shook the sky, and the whole capital was surprised. Many citizens looked up at the sky. The passers-by stopped walking and the drivers rear-ended one after another. The busy crossroads were blocked for a while. Abe Su-chien trembled all over as he looked at the countless shattered golden particles falling to the ground in the sky. They slowly piled up and then a person slowly stood up from them. This person's body was blurry, like countless tiny golden light spots combined together. Her entire body seemed a little distorted, but one could vaguely make out that this was a graceful woman. Her appearance was a little blurry and at first she did not even have facial features. However, as the golden halo twisted, her features became clearer bit by bit and slowly, a nose and eyes appeared. Just as her appearance was about to take shape, Abe Su Qian suddenly let out a desperate scream. His whole body burst out with dazzling black and white light. With a roar of anger, his body turned into a cannonball and rushed toward the mystical silver fox. After Lu Yi released the mystical silver fox, he slowly returned to his human form. He saw Abe Su Qian rushing over, but he didn't stop him at all. Instead, there was a hint of mockery at the corner of his mouth. At this time, Abe Su Qian was burning his life and rushing toward the mystical silver fox with the purest power of the true method, trying to destroy her when she showed her figure. But as soon as he rushed in front of her, the mystical silver fox suddenly stretched out her hand, and her palm stopped in front of Abe Su Qian. Abe Su Qian's cannonball momentum suddenly stopped, and the black and white qi around his body also froze in an instant. Lu Yi sneered and said, "Stupid guy." Just as Lu Yi was about to give Abe Su Qian a bet, the mystical silver fox suddenly pinched her fingers and clenched her hands into fists. In an instant, the black and white qi around Abe Su Qian's body exploded in all directions with a buzz. When the ghost qi from the yin and yang realms met the nine-tailed celestial fox, it was like a ferocious beast meeting a more ferocious monster. It subconsciously fled in all directions. But when this ghostly aura escaped, it forcibly tore Abe Su Qian's already very old body into countless pieces. In an instant, the old man of the yin-yang Dao turned into a cloud of blood mist, causing a burst of frightened exclamations from the surroundings. Some of the ordinary people near the Qingming shrine were so scared that they fled to the distance, some were so scared that they hid behind obstacles and shivered, and some hid in the corner and secretly took pictures of everything in front of them with their mobile phones. At the same time that Abe Su Qian was killed in seconds, there was an angry shout on the roof next to Qingming shrine, "Evildoer, kill quickly." When Lu Yi heard the voice, he turned his head and saw two monks standing on the roof with Buddhist beads around their necks and Buddhist staffs in their hands. These two monks were dressed in kasaya, and half of their arms were exposed. Their muscles were so developed that they were like steel bars wrapped around their bodies like iron towers and vajras. Lu Yi frowned slightly. He knew that these were the guardian vajras of Mount Hai. Their spiritual energy was tyrannical and they were good at fighting. Everyone's strength was close to the Jinshin phase. He began to worry. The bald donkeys of Mount Hai are really fast. As soon as his voice fell, he saw countless figures jumping down from the roofs of the houses and rushing towards them from the direction of Mount Hai. Lu Ye's heart trembled. He looked at the mystical silver fox anxiously, but he didn't dare to urge the mystical silver fox. He knew that at this time, it was the time for the mystical silver fox's soul to reorganize, her memory to recover, and her strength to awaken again. Once he disturbed her, it would cause great damage to the mystical silver fox. At this moment, the monk on the roof next to him shouted loudly. He waved his Buddhist staff and smashed it towards the top of the mystical silver fox's head like a meteor. The mystical silver fox didn't seem to see it, but just as the Buddhist staff was about to hit her head, she suddenly raised her head and let out a shrill roar. The blue veins on the neck of the mystical silver fox stood out, and her mouth was wide open. A fierce voice that seemed to pierce through the sky and tear the earth burst out from her chest. This shrill roar suddenly shook the surrounding air, and then with a buzz, the air seemed to shrink and quickly surge out of the waves, spreading in all directions. The shock wave shook the ground and countless cracks spread in all directions from the feet of the mystical silver fox. The glass of the surrounding houses was all shattered in an instant, and many wooden houses even collapsed and fell to the ground. Some ordinary people who were close to her fell to the ground with blood flowing from their 7 orifices without saying a word. It was unknown whether they were dead or alive. As for the 2 powerful monks who bore the brunt of the attack, their bodies seemed to have been frozen in place. After a long time, blood slowly seeped out of the pores of their skin, and their whole bodies slowly turned into a blood man. Their bodies fell to the ground softly. Lu Yi knew that the shrill roar of the mystical silver fox had shaken their qi and blood out of control. They fled in all directions and finally their blood vessels burst and they died. Although these 2 monks were not difficult to deal with for Lu Yi, after being sealed for nearly 1,000 years, Lu Yi had always been worried about whether the mystical silver fox would be able to regain its vigor. However, with just a shrill roar, the mystical silver fox had shaken the 2 guardian vajras to death. Its power was not less than that of the past. I'm the mystical silver fox. Who can stop me? Even if the mystical silver fox only had 1 soul and 2 souls left, even if she had been sealed in the 5-star talisman array for nearly 1,000 years, once she appeared in the world again, her sharpness was still not something that ordinary people could resist. In a trance, Lu Yi seemed to see the majestic figure of the mystical silver fox in the battle with Su Yi. At this moment, Lu Ye's blood was burning all over his body. He had planned for decades and finally succeeded. The Fox Zen school could finally regain its glory. But not long after he was happy, he heard an angry shout that shook the sky. Form a formation to subdue the devil. Lu Yi looked up and saw that the roofs of the surrounding houses were already full of monks. There were no less than 500 or 600 of them. These monks quickly stood on the spot with their palms together, or sat down cross-legged with Buddha beads in their hands. They began to recite scriptures in unison. These chanting sounds shook heaven and earth, revealing an extremely powerful Buddhist power. At once, the mystical silver fox screamed in pain, and her body, which was becoming clearer and clearer, became distorted and blurred again. Among these monks, the leader was a monk dressed in a red cassock. His whole body was shining with amazing golden light. From a distance he was an old monk in his 70s. Lu Ye's heart trembled and he said in a low voice, "The sect master of the Tiantai sect, Imagawa Koyun." The Tiantai sect was an extremely powerful force in Japanese Buddhism. Although it was not as good as it was in the Warring States period, and the Tiantai sect in Mount Hai had suffered 3 disasters and fallen from the clouds to the bottom, a centipede was still alive. So far, there were still an astonishing number of martial monks in the Yanli Temple of Mount Hai. When these monks quickly formed the demon-subduing formation, the power of the formation was so powerful that it immediately caused the sky to be covered with dark clouds. The thunder clouds were rolling, and there were signs that the end of the world was coming. Even Lu Yi, such a powerful and abnormal 8-tailed fox, had a sense of fear that he didn't want to take another look. Lu Yi looked at the rolling thunder and lightning above his head. He gritted his teeth and said, "Dharma Hua exterminating formation." In the battle of Su Yi who had besieged the mystical silver fox, it was the cultivators of the Tiantai sect who had sacrificed their lives to use this formation to attract the heavenly tribulation, which made the mystical silver fox busy dealing with the heavenly thunder. That was why many Japanese warriors had swarmed up and used the tactic of ants biting a giant elephant to nail her to the spot. The master of the Tiantai sect obviously realized what had happened here at the first time, so he made an amazing decision in an instant. He would activate the Dharma Hua exterminating formation again and seal this terrible demon again. These monks obviously knew that once this formation was activated, most of them here would become sacrifices to launch the heavenly tribulation and die. However, none of these monks retreated timidly. Their faces were full of expressions of facing death calmly, and their voices of chanting the scriptures and incantations did not tremble at all. Soon, the rolling divine thunder in the sky became more and more fierce. The thunder and lightning that fell from all directions were so thick that it made people's hair stand on end. Lu Yi secretly gritted his teeth, quickly took out a talisman from his bosom, and also quickly recited the incantation. Just as he was reciting the incantation, there was a loud bang, and the rolling thunder and lightning around him fell in an instant. It was as if countless divine thunders had gathered together, forming an astonishing torrent of heavenly thunder, rushing towards the mystical silver fox. The figures of the mystical silver fox and Lu Yi were instantly engulfed by the dazzling white light. For a moment the sky was bright and they were blind. After a long time the light around them slowly returned to normal. Imagawa Koyun, the master of the Tiantai sect, spat out a mouthful of blood. Many monks around him also fell to the ground. A monk beside him tilted his body and immediately struggled to rush forward to support him. He gasped and said, "Master Koyun, we succeeded." Imagawa Koyun took a look at the field and saw that the original Qingming shrine had almost disappeared. There was a huge deep pit on the ground, and the houses around the shrine had also become ruins. There was no one in the original place where Lu Yi and the mystical silver fox had been, not even a little ash. Imagawa Koyun frowned. After taking a deep breath, he sighed and said, "No, we failed." The monk next to him was shocked and said, "How could that be? Didn't the heavenly thunder hit her?" Imagawa Koyun said bitterly, "At the moment when the heavenly thunder fell, they ran away." The monk's hair stood on end. Ran away? The mystical silver fox actually ran away? Buddha, such a terrible demon actually escaped in front of us. Who on earth let him go? After all, Imagawa Koyun was the master of the Tiantai sect. He quickly got rid of the depression of the failure of the demon seal. He slowly stood up and said in a cold tone, "Investigate, immediately find out who let the mystical silver fox go. Find out where the mystical silver fox has escaped to. Even if we go to the ends of the earth, we will kill her." The monk next to him whispered, "But Master Koyun, who can take on the responsibility of hunting down the mystical silver fox. Imagawa Koyun said coldly, we interrupted the reorganization of the mystical silver fox's soul. Now her soul must have scattered and gone to find her other souls. Therefore we must find her and kill her before she finds the other souls, otherwise. Imagawa Koyun didn't say the rest of the sentence, but the monk next to him could guess what he was going to say next. Otherwise, once the mystical silver fox recovered all her strength, it would be an unprecedented catastrophe for the Japanese cultivation world. Sorry, I'm too tired today. I went home and slept first. It's even later, but there will be a lot of updates. There will be another update later. In addition, someone asked me if the story would be dominated by Japan in the future. My answer was, how could that be? Japan is just a branch. Of course, the main line is in China. Chapter 642. Just as the mystical silver fox was released, Ziyuan, Su Chan, and Zhou Qin were about to start their big plan. But as soon as they moved, Su Chan's body suddenly froze in place. She looked in the direction of Jingdu with a blank and surprised face. Ziyuan and Zhou Qin both stopped and turned to look at her in confusion. Ziyuan asked carefully, Su Chan, what's wrong? What's wrong? Su Chan felt her heart skip a beat. There seemed to be a very familiar aura in the distance. This aura might be very strange to ordinary people, but for Su Chan, it was extremely familiar because it was the unique aura of the fox demon. Where did the fox demon come from? What a strong aura. How could it be so strong? Su Chan looked over and saw that there seemed to be a very faint dark cloud in the distant sky. It was obvious that this powerful fox demon chi had provoked the heavenly thunder. The little girl looked at the distant sky in surprise and thought to herself, could it be Master? No, even Master doesn't have such a strong aura. How strong is the fox demon chi to be able to reach me? The little girl stared straight into the distance with her glasses, and her mind was running wild for a while. Suddenly she didn't know why, but 4 words suddenly popped up in her mind, mystical silver fox. Yes, it must be the mystical silver fox. In the world, only the aura of the mystical silver fox could be so strong. This thought immediately frightened Su Chan. Her face was pale and she immediately took a few steps back subconsciously. She cried out involuntarily, no, this is impossible. Although the little girl was sometimes stupid, she was often very smart at the moment of life and death, especially after the Taoist assembly. The little girl naturally knew what it meant to the Fox Zen school if the mystical silver fox was really resurrected. What it meant to Li Yundong. Little by little, little by little. An extremely terrible idea suddenly flashed through Su Chan's mind. She immediately jumped up and said to Ziyuan and Zhou Qin in horror, oh no, let's go. Yundong is in danger. As he spoke, he took the lead and rushed forward. Ziyuan and Zhou Qin were at a loss and looked at Su Chan suspiciously. Zhou Qin couldn't help chasing after her and asking, Su Chan, what's wrong with you? What's going on? Su Chan looked anxious, but she didn't dare to say her guess, so she said, don't ask so much now. Hurry up and implement our plan. Let Li Yundong get away as soon as possible. Otherwise it will be too late. Zhou Qin became more and more confused. She wanted to ask again, but Ziyuan immediately said firmly, don't ask. Listen to Su Chan first. Let's go. Seeing this, Zhou Qin didn't say anything more. She nodded and quickly followed. The 3 of them rushed to the vicinity of the royal courtyard, only to see that the Japanese reporters guarding at the door had already been boiling. After witnessing the strange situation of the previous fight, they thought that Masako Tachibana had won the final victory. They were so excited that they wished they could rush inside and take pictures. For reporters, these monks of Xinyan Tantrism blocked them outside, which was a great torture to their curiosity. Ziyuan saw at a glance that the 3 monks at the door were also looking curiously in the direction of the courtyard. She lowered her voice and said quickly, I'm in charge of the one in the middle. Su Chan, you're in charge of the one on the left. Zhou Qin, you're in charge of the one on the right. Do you have any objections? Zhou Qin and Su Chan nodded at the same time, and Ziyuan also nodded. She raised her hand and quickly threw a small earth magic behind the Japanese reporters. With a loud bang, the mountains behind these Japanese reporters suddenly shook, which scared them so much that they immediately subconsciously held the machine and lay on the ground. Ziyuan gritted her teeth and immediately said, go. After that, a purple light flashed around her, and the 9th heaven Ziyuan's silk quickly swept out. Her figure also disappeared in an instant. The ninth heaven Ziyuan silk was like a huge net, which instantly enveloped all the monks in the middle. Although the monk struggled desperately and roared loudly, his voice was trapped in the ninth heaven Ziyuan silk. His whole body was wrapped like a mummy and his body fell straight down. The two monks next to him were attracted by Ziyuan's magic. They looked in the direction of the sound with vigilance. The person in the middle was hit and fell backward, but they didn't seem to notice it. At this time, Zhou Qin's whip broke through the air with a swish. The head of the whip was like a poisonous snake spitting out its tongue. It accurately hit the Shanzhong acupoint on the chest of the monk on the right, causing his qi and blood to roll. He couldn't even cry for help, and his body involuntarily bent down. Then the Vulcan's whip in Zhou Qin's hand quickly wrapped around the monk's body. Zhou Qin shook her wrist and pulled him to her like a prey. She stretched out her hand and quickly poked the monk with her fingers. The monk fainted without saying a word. Although Zhou Qin didn't make the monk make a sound, the sound of Zhou Qin's whip breaking through the air and the sound of pulling people attracted the monks on the left to look at them. As soon as the monk turned his head and saw the scene in front of him, he was about to cry out in alarm. But as soon as he opened his mouth, a beautiful girl appeared in front of him. The girl held a strand of black hair in her hand and touched his neck. He immediately felt his whole body stiffen, and his voice disappeared in his throat. He lost control of his whole body and tilted to the side. At this time, Ziyuan also appeared in front of the fallen monk in the middle at the same time and caught him before he fell to the ground. Ziyuan and Su Chan looked at each other and nodded quickly. The two of them pulled the two monks and quickly went into the jungle. Ziyuan, Zhou Qin, and Su Chan moved as fast as lightning. Before the reporters at the door noticed anything unusual, they had already finished everything. When these reporters stood up in shock, they were surprised to find that the three monks at the door had disappeared. For a moment, these reporters looked at the open and unobstructed door in a daze and looked at each other. They all wanted to rush in immediately, but the discipline and rules of the Japanese people had been deeply rooted in their bones and blood. Although there was no one guarding the door, they still didn't rush in for a while. But at this time, they saw the three ascetics of the Pure Land School they had seen before slowly walking toward the royal courtyard. They watched helplessly as the three monks entered the courtyard, and their minds immediately became active. They looked at each other, and at this time, the curiosity and sense of responsibility of a journalist finally overcame everything. With a shout, they rushed inside like a swarm of bees. Masako Tachibana and Kaisai Hikaryuni both knew that although the emperor was also in the courtyard, there were masters from all kinds of sects in the Japanese cultivation world. Naturally, no one could rush to the emperor. Therefore, most of the monks of Xinyan Tantrism were arranged on the periphery of Mount Koya and outside the royal courtyard to prevent outsiders from attacking. The monks in the courtyard were all paying attention to the situation on the field. How could they pay attention to the situation around them? When these reporters rushed into the field like a tide, it was too late for them to stop them. Just as the cultivators of the Japanese cultivation world were attacking Li Yundong, the Japanese reporters rushed in as if they were afraid that the world would be in chaos. For a moment, cameras flew together, and the flashes were the same color. Li Yundong was going to fight with these Japanese cultivators, but when he saw this scene he was stunned. Just as he was in a daze, a voice came to his ear and said quickly and anxiously, "Li Yundong, go." Li Yundong heard this voice clearly. It was Ziyuan's voice that had been transmitted to him. Why is she here? Li Yundong couldn't help but be stunned. Li Yundong was not a reckless person. He knew that even Guan Yunchang, who went to the meeting alone, had to hold Lu Su hostage to escape in the end, let alone himself. If he didn't take advantage of the chaos to leave now, when would he? In the midst of the chaos, Li Yundong took advantage of the fact that everyone's attention was diverted and disappeared in an instant. In the courtyard, these reporters rushed in. They looked as excited as sharks who had smelled blood. They asked loudly, "Mr. Tiyuman, may I ask why you came to Mount Koya this time?" "Master Kaisai Hikaryuni, I heard that there was a real battle here. Is that true?" "Miss Chuyan, what happened in the sky just now? Can you explain it to us?" Although the Japanese cultivators on the scene had seen many storms, they couldn't help but be dumbfounded when they saw this scene. Some cultivators became angry and shouted at the reporters, "Who are you? Who let you in? Drive them out. Shut up. Don't you see that they are filming? Do you want to be filmed?" The monks of Xinyan Tantrism looked at these reporters at a loss. Although they were powerful cultivators in the face of the satellite live broadcast cameras and these ordinary mortals, they didn't know how to deal with the scene in front of them. Kaisai Hikaryuni was extremely unhappy, but he still said to the reporters kindly, "Amitba, please behave yourself. His Majesty the Mikado is upstairs." The Mikado's power was extraordinary. The reporters on the scene immediately quieted down and stood up solemnly, no longer making noise. At this time, a figure also stood up from the half-covered window upstairs. The figure flashed past the window and slowly went downstairs. The faces of the cultivators of all sects on the scene were very ugly. In front of the Mikado, the Japanese cultivation world had been slapped in the face in public. Some of them soon became alert and looked around for traces of Li Yundong. While they were searching around, they heard a loud laugh coming from the air. Li Yundong's figure stood in the clouds and said with a smile, "The waves in the east of the river lead dozens of people to drive this small boat and a leaf. It's not like the 9-layered dragon in Phoenix Tower, but it's a tiger's den. I think this single-blade society is like the Sai Village Society. What a good view of the river." After that, Li Yundong laughed 3 times and disappeared into the sky. The Japanese cultivators were immediately furious. Almost all the Japanese men had read the 3 Kingdoms, and these cultivators were all well-cultivated and knowledgeable masters. Naturally, they knew that Li Yundong was reciting Guanhanqing's single-blade society to satirize them as clowns in Jiangdong. Some cultivators said angrily, "Damn it, let this Chinaman escape. Bastard ignorant junior, how dare you laugh at us? Damn it, go and get him back." But although they were shouting fiercely, none of them took action. Firstly, there were reporters at the scene, and secondly, the previous battle had really shocked them. This young man was actually the reincarnation of the Wisdom King. This was really too scary. The Japanese worshipped the immovable Wisdom King the most. Just as these cultivators were making a racket, a monk suddenly rushed to Kaisai Hikaryuni and whispered a few words in his ear. Kaisai Hikaryuni's originally calm and peaceful face suddenly changed dramatically. He said with a horrified and distorted face, "What did you say?" The monk said it again in his ear, and this time Kaisai Hikaryuni's whole body trembled. The surrounding reporters looked at Kaisai Hikaryuni curiously. They didn't understand why this great monk, whose expression would not change even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of him, would panic to such an extent. But although they didn't hear what he said, the cultivators of all sects and schools heard such a sentence with their super strength. The mystical silver fox had reappeared in the world. In an instant, all the Japanese cultivators in the royal courtyard of Mount Koya fell silent, and a terrible and solemn atmosphere enveloped the field. Chapter 643. The news of the resurrection of the mystical silver fox made all the cultivators in Japan feel as if they were immersed in an ice cellar, and a chill pierced their bones. Although it had been nearly 1,000 years since the Great War of Sealing Demons in Suyi, the horrible memory of this war was still lingering in the Japanese cultivators' minds. They didn't dare to imagine what kind of disaster would be brought to Japan and the Japanese cultivation world after such a big devil was released. Kaisai Hikaryuni was the first to recover from this terrible news. He said to the reporters beside him, who widened their eyes and were full of curiosity, "Amitba, please go to the front hall to have a rest. Later, Jinyin Tantrism will hold a press conference. At that time, if you have any questions you can ask them. Now please leave first." The reporters looked at each other and had no choice but to retreat under the guidance of the other monks. After the reporters left, the other cultivators immediately shouted, "Master Kaisai Hikaryuni, what's going on?" The mystical silver fox was sealed in Jingdu. There were Inyang masters of the Inyang sect and monks of the Tiantai sect guarding it. Why did it escape? The Inyang masters of the Kumo family, who had always been enemies with the Abe family, also said coldly, "Abe is right. Isn't your family responsible for guarding the soul of the mystical silver fox? Why is there such a mistake?" Abe was right. He was a middle-aged man who looked very dignified. He said in a deep voice, "Someone must have taken advantage of the situation. 2 of our clansmen are in Tokyo. Abe Aomori and I came to Mount Koya, so the Qingming shrine is empty." The Inyang masters of the Kumo family sneered and said, "Why didn't you make full preparations? Don't you know the terrible consequences of letting the mystical silver fox escape?" Abe said angrily, "This must be a conspiracy. They transferred us to this place, and then took advantage of the situation to secretly let go of the mystical silver fox, He Maochang. Our family has guarded the mystical silver fox for nearly 1,000 years. The price we paid is known to the whole world. It's not your turn to talk about it." He Maochang and the other two sneered and did not speak again. At this time an eminent monk of the Pure Land sect said slowly, "Amitba, calm down everyone. It's not a way to investigate the responsibility now. Let's figure out what happened first. It's impossible for the mystical silver fox to escape by her own strength. There are not only the ape family guarding there, but also the people of the Yanli temple of the Tiantai sect guarding around. Even if she can escape by herself, she will be sealed back soon. But now that she has escaped, it is very likely that someone has secretly received her, or that someone is plotting to release her." The eminent monk's words made everyone nod in agreement. Gu Ziguanji turned to the monk who had reported the news and said, "Did the Tiantai sect make it clear who let the mystical silver fox go?" The monk shook his head quickly. "No." Kaisai Hikaryuni pondered for a moment, then he suddenly raised his head and said to everyone with flickering eyes, "Everyone, I think we might have fallen into a trap." Everyone was shocked and asked, "What trap?" Kaisai Hikaryuni said slowly, "Li Yundong, who came to fight with us, is very likely to be a cover to attract our attention." Everyone was shocked again. They looked at each other but soon nodded and said, "Yes, it's possible. Must be like this. Catch this Chinaman and force him to tell him the whereabouts of the mystical silver fox." Goddess Chuyun of the Ise Shinto frowned slightly. She suddenly said softly, "This is just an inference. There is no evidence." Although her voice was soft, it carried a lot of weight. It could be said that Masako Tachibana had lost her reputation in this battle. It could be imagined that the Tachibana family would fall into a low valley because of this. The Ise Shinto would definitely rise again, and the goddess Chuyun would play a very important role in it. Therefore, as soon as she spoke, the cultivators around all looked at her. Although some people disagreed, they did not refute because of the power of the Ise Shinto in the face of the goddess Chuyun. Kaisai Hikaryuni said, "There is indeed no evidence, but think about it. Why didn't the mystical silver fox escape earlier or later? Why did she escape at this time?" When Li Yundong was about to leave, these reporters who had been blocked outside rushed in. One thing is a coincidence. What about 2 or 3 things? Besides, the current situation is related to the life and death of our Japanese cultivation world. If we still follow the rules to pursue evidence, it will be a terrible disaster. How to save this terrible situation is the righteousness. Kaisai Hikaryuni's words were firm and his tone was heavy, which was moving. Goddess Chuyun was stunned. She was a real cold and taciturn woman. She was not good at debating with words. A great monk like Kaisai Hikaryuni often had to debate with others about the Dharma. His eloquence and thinking were incredibly strong. If they were to compete in words, even 100 Chuyun would not be able to defeat this old monk. The middle-aged man next to her knew that Kaisai Hikaryuni's words had seized the commanding heights of morality and righteousness, but Kaisai Hikaryuni had taken advantage of this opportunity to divert everyone's attention and spearhead. He had quickly gotten rid of Jinyan Tantrism from the defeat in the battle just now, so as to avoid everyone's accountability. After all, it was a great loss of face to lose to a Chinese in front of the Emperor of Japan. But at the moment, what was more important than investigating this responsibility was to hunt down the mystical silver fox. At this time the middle-aged man said, "Master Kaisai Hikaryuni is right. We should immediately chase after the mystical silver fox before she fully recovers her strength." Kaisai Hikaryuni looked at the middle-aged man in surprise, as if he didn't understand why Ise Shinto would speak up for him. But seeing the olive branch handed over by the other party, Kaisai Hikaryuni quickly took it. He said, "Amitba, Lord Xinguang is right. This is the time for us to unite sincerely and overcome the calamity." Xinguang smiled and said, "Master Kaisai Hikaryuni is right, but who will take the responsibility of hunting down the mystical silver fox?" Kaisai Hikaryuni was stunned. He glanced at Xinguang and saw that his smile was full of meaning. He was furious. He thought that the other party had handed him an olive branch, but who knew that it was a straw? Kaisai Hikaryuni cursed in his heart, "What a cunning guy. How dare he try to take away the dominance of the Japanese cultivation world at this time? Where there are people there is Jianghu, and where there is Jianghu there is fighting. Even the Japanese, who have always been united, can't jump out of this cage in the face of the struggle for fame and wealth and power." Masako Tachibana had fallen. Now who didn't covet the throne of Mount Tianwang? Kaisai Hikaryuni knew that whoever could shoulder the responsibility of hunting down the mystical silver fox would be able to take away the leadership. Whoever could seize the leadership would be able to stand at the commanding heights of the Japanese cultivation world on the basis of righteousness, just like what the Jinyan Tantrism had done before. Kaisai Hikaryuni wanted to object, but he couldn't refute Xinguang's words no matter how hard he racked his brains, because the other party was also speaking from a righteous point of view. Moreover, it was even more impossible for him to recommend the Jinyan Tantrism to stand at the forefront of the storm. Who would believe in a sect that had just been defeated in a fight? However, Kaisai Hikaryuni was not an ordinary person. His mind was like lightning. He thought quickly and said, "The mystical silver fox is a powerful demon that has only been seen in thousands of years. If we want to catch her, one or two sects can't succeed. This matter should be done together by all of us." Xinguang also cursed in his heart, "Old bald donkey, you know that you can't object to my words, so you simply suggest that all the major sects share the leadership together. Damn it." Xinguang smiled and said, "Although what Master Kaisai Hikaryuni said is good, if we don't have a leader, we will fall into a situation where there is no leader. Maybe we will be defeated by the mystical silver fox one by one." Some sects were close to the Ise Shinto, so they agreed one after another. Naturally, the other sects were not stupid. Some people objected, some shouted, and some bowed their heads in thought. Tachibana Wakako, who walked to the backyard with Masako Tachibana in her arms, carefully wiped the blood from the corner of her mother's mouth. She raised her head and looked at the cultivators who were quarreling in the courtyard. She said with a blank face, "Are they all crazy? Why are they still quarreling at this time? Why can't they unite a little?" Tsuruko Tachibana knelt on the tatami, took the blood-stained towel from Tachibana Wakako's hand and washed it in the wooden bucket beside her. She sighed softly and said, "Wakako, when you grow up, you will understand." Tachibana Wakako shook her head and said, "If I have to understand this when I grow up, I will become like them, then I would rather not grow up." Tsuruko Tachibana smiled and stroked Tachibana Wakako's long black hair lovingly. "I hope you will remember what you said in the future. Wakako, don't waste your life on fighting for fame and fortune. Don't repeat Masako's mistake." Tachibana Wakako seemed to have grown up a lot. She looked up at her grandmother and nodded hard. "Yes." Tsuruko Tachibana smiled with relief. She raised her eyes and looked worriedly at the noisy cultivators in the field. She was silent. Tachibana Wakako also followed her gaze and said worriedly, "How long do they want to quarrel? Grandma, how do you think they will solve it? Will they keep quarreling until the mystical silver fox recovers all her strength?" Tsuruko Tachibana shook his head and said, "No, they will definitely think of a solution. And this method is simple and easy to do." Tachibana Wakako asked in confusion, "What is it?" Tsuruko Tachibana frowned and said, "First, whoever finds the mystical silver fox first will take the lead." Tachibana Wakako said curiously, "But the world is so big. Where can we find the mystical silver fox? It doesn't matter if we send fewer people. If we send a large number of people to look for it, will our own hometown be empty, and in turn the mystical silver fox will take advantage of it?" Tsuruko Tachibana looked at Tachibana Wakako with admiration and said, "You're right. So, in fact, the best way is the second." Tachibana Wakako asked, "What's the second way?" Tsuruko Tachibana said with a serious face, "Whoever can defeat Li Jiandong will be able to take the lead." Tachibana Wakako was shocked. "What?" As soon as she blurted out these words, she immediately reacted. It could be said that all of this had an inseparable relationship with Li Jiandong. In the eyes of almost all the cultivators present, Li Jiandong must be one of the participants in releasing the mystical silver fox. They had the reason and righteousness to crusade against Li Jiandong. In addition, Li Jiandong had defeated Masako Tachibana in front of His Majesty the Mikado, which had humiliated the Japanese cultivation world. If anyone could defeat Li Jiandong again, the prestige and reputation it would bring would naturally be self-evident. Tachibana Wakako was not a fool. She quickly figured it out, but she couldn't believe it. They won't leave the mystical silver fox alone and go to find trouble with Li Jiandong first, will they? As soon as Tachibana Wakako finished speaking, she heard a cultivator in the field say loudly, "In my opinion, all of this is because of that Chinese man. If it weren't for him, the mystical silver fox wouldn't have been able to escape. If it weren't for him, we wouldn't have lost so much face in front of His Majesty the Mikado. In my opinion, whoever can defeat this Chinese man, we will recommend him to be the leader of the crusade against the mystical silver fox." This sentence stunned Tachibana Wakako. She couldn't believe that someone would really ignore the danger of the mystical silver fox and go to find trouble with Li Jiandong first. Are these guys idiots? Can't they tell the priorities? However, when the cultivators of the other sects heard this, they were silent for a while and nodded at the same time. Se Shinto's divine light was full of sarcastic smile. He said, "This is really a good idea. Go to find trouble with the reincarnated Wisdom King? Who will go?" Everyone looked at each other. Yes, this Chinese man is the immovable Wisdom King. Such an abnormal power of Masako Tachibana has been absorbed by this guy. Isn't it courting death to go to find trouble with him? At this time, Kaisai Hikaryuni said, "Don't worry. The power of Wisdom King used by Masako Tachibana can't be completely used by Li Jiandong. This power belongs to our Mount Koya. He can use it but he can't take it away." Everyone was immediately relieved. Many cultivators began to clamor, "Go and kill this Chinese man who humiliated us. He must be one of the conspirators who released the mystical silver fox. He must also know where the mystical silver fox is hiding. Go and catch him and force him to tell us the whereabouts of the mystical silver fox. Yes. We must take revenge. But if we go to the door, will it cause the rebound of the cultivation world in China? Humph, if the Chinese man covers up for this guy, then we will declare war. This Chinese man humiliated us in front of His Majesty the Mikado, and then took advantage of the weakness to let the mystical silver fox go. This is already the biggest provocation to us. Yes. If any sect protects him, then we will go to war with them." Most of the cultivation sects responded loudly and angrily. The emotions on the scene were as fierce as a raging fire, burning fiercely. Se Shinto's divine light and Chuyun looked at the crowd in shock. They all wanted to say something, but at this time, all the sects and schools in the Japanese cultivation world were excited, and the general trend had been formed. If they didn't go with the trend, even Se Shinto would be abandoned. Not only would they not get any benefits, but they would also be regarded as traitors and aliens by the Japanese cultivation world. Tachibana Wakako, who was looking at the crowd from afar in the backyard, said in shock, "Are they all crazy? This will cause a war between the cultivation world of China and Japan." Tsuruko Tachibana shook his head and sighed, "Child, the war has already begun. You and I can't stop it." Chapter 644. Just as the Japanese cultivation world was in a state of excitement, a dazzling ray of light suddenly appeared in a remote uninhabited mountain area on the mainland of China. After the ray of light flashed, two figures appeared in the dense jungle. One of them was tall and sturdy. It was Lu Yi, and the other was shining with golden light. His body was twisted, and after a while, there was a loud bang, turning into countless rays of golden light and scattering in all directions. Lu Yi was shocked and angry. He shouted, "Don't want the mystical silver fox. I'm a disciple of the Fox Zen school. Don't go. I let you go. Don't run." However, the mystical silver fox didn't seem to hear him. Her young spirit doppelganger instantly escaped. Even if Lu Yi wanted to follow her footsteps, he didn't know how to catch up. Lu Yi stood there in a daze. After a long time, a person slowly walked out from behind him. This person had a graceful figure and a vermilion beauty mole between her eyebrows. It was Ao Wushuang. Ao Wushuang was also surprised and said, "Did you release the mystical silver fox? Why did she run away?" "Bastard." Lu Yi punched a big tree beside him unwillingly. His fist was like a hot knife cutting cheese. In an instant, it penetrated the big tree that could only be hugged by two people. Lu Yi gritted his teeth and said, "The mystical silver fox has been sealed for too long." When she was released, the reorganization of her soul was interrupted by the people of the Tiantai sect. Therefore she has no memory now, nor has she recovered all her strength. In addition, because her soul is incomplete, she doesn't even have the most basic thinking and judgment. At this time, the intelligence and reaction of the mystical silver fox are no different from those of the most primitive beasts. She can't distinguish between enemies and friends. She can only judge the most beneficial choice for herself based on the most primitive beast nature. Ao Wushuang was tongue-tied and asked, "How could this happen? What's the best choice for her now?" Lu Yi looked at Ao Wushuang with a cold face. "If it were you, how would you react after losing something?" Ao Wushuang said quickly, "Go and get it back." Lu Yi nodded slightly. "That's right." Ao Wushuang was also a very smart woman. She soon realized what Lu Yi was angry about. "You don't know where the rest of the soul of the mystical silver fox is?" Lu Yi sneered and said, "Of course I know. Do you think my decades of planning is in vain?" Ao Wushuang asked in confusion, "Then why are you so angry?" Since you know, why don't you just go and wait for them? Lu Yi said angrily, do you know which soul the mystical silver fox is looking for? Moreover, if I know, how can others not know? If I go to wait for the rabbit, then the bald donkeys of Shiyuan Temple and Jinshan Temple will know. Most importantly, how can the mystical silver fox appear so easily? Her paranoia is rare in the world. I suspect that even if she finds the remnant of her soul, she won't retrieve it immediately. Because when she retrieves her soul, she will definitely lose the ability to defend herself for a period of time. So, she will definitely wait for the best opportunity to strike. Ao Wushuang became more and more confused. But isn't this better? That will save you the trouble. Lu Yi was usually a scheming and shrewd old fox. He had always been famous for his calculations and strategies. Even if he encountered something big, he would be calm. However, he seemed extremely anxious and his state was extremely abnormal. He said, "What's good about it? Do you know how much time we have left? The mystical silver fox has been sealed for 1,000 years. Although she is eager for revenge, her patience and suspicion are enough for her to hide for a long time. Moreover, the news of the resurrection of the mystical silver fox will definitely spread throughout the cultivation world in China. At that time, the cultivators of all sects will go crazy to look for the mystical silver fox. Do you think that with the character of the mystical silver fox she will show up?" Ao Wushuang fell silent and didn't say a word. Indeed, as Lu Yi had said, if she was the mystical silver fox, she would definitely keep waiting and hide for a few months or even a few years. For the mystical silver fox, her time measurement unit must be calculated in 100 years or even 1,000 years. She had been sealed for nearly 1,000 years. Would she care about waiting a little longer? Lu Yi walked back and forth anxiously. He put his hands behind his back, his face as dark as water, and his eyes flashed with a cold light, as if he was quickly thinking about countermeasures. Ao Wushuang was silent for a long time before she said slowly, "In fact, I have never understood why you have to resurrect the mystical silver fox. Isn't it good for us to be like this now? Do you have to revive the Fox Zen school? Don't you know that this may lead to the destruction of our Fox Zen school?" Lu Yi suddenly stopped. He turned his head and said with a gloomy look in his eyes, "You are really naive. Others see us as demons and ghosts and want to get rid of us as soon as possible. You don't see yourself as an outsider." Ao Wushuang also argued, "But didn't you see that the Fox Zen school is thriving in Li Jiandong's hands? He now has a place in the cultivation world. If you hadn't framed him, how could so many hostile sects have come to attack the Fox Zen school?" Lu Yi laughed angrily. "Before he appeared, did you forget that the 6 great sects besieged the Fox Zen school?" Ao Wushuang's face darkened and she said, "This is caused by the grudge between me and Yen Fang." Lu Yi sneered and said, "An ordinary man is innocent, but he gets into trouble because of his wealth. You shouldn't be such a naive and childish person." "Wushuang, I think you've been with Li Jiandong for too long, and your heart has softened." Ao Wushuang said with a cold face, "I'm worried that Chana will be involved." Lu Yi said, "When the nest is overturned, how can there be an intact egg? Let me tell you, if the mystical silver fox doesn't show up for a long time, then your precious disciple and Li Jiandong will definitely face the blame and censure of the whole cultivation world. At that time, Ao Wushuang's face became extremely ugly. Why is this happening? Didn't we agree not to involve Chang'e in this? Lu Yi smiled coldly. Do you think I want to? What can I do when things have changed like this? Ao Wushuang couldn't help but be furious. You bastard. You don't keep your word. I'm going to find the leader. After that, she turned into a blue light and left quickly. Lu Yi looked at Ao Wushuang's departing figure and said loudly, You'd better go to find the mystical silver fox first. After he shouted, Ao Wushuang had already disappeared. Lu Yi sneered for a while. After a long time, he turned around and went into the dense forest. At this time, Li Jiandong was flying to Tianan City with Su Chan, Ziyuan, and Zhou Qin. Li Jiandong flew in the air and looked at Ziyuan in confusion. Why are you here? Su Chan was afraid that Li Jiandong would blame Ziyuan, so she rushed to say, Sister Ziyuan was afraid that you would be detained by the Japanese, so she discussed a way with us to secretly pick you up. Li Jiandong thought for a moment and suddenly realized something. Did you let those reporters in? Ziyuan nodded with a smile and said, Yes, but Zhou Qin asked someone to make the call. Although he saw that the 3 of them had not listened to him and acted on their own, Li Jiandong still felt a little grateful in his heart. He glanced at Zhou Qin only to see his beautiful disciple rushing to say, It was Ziyuan's careful plan. I was just an errand runner. Su Chan also nodded quickly. Yes, yes, Sister Ziyuan's idea is so good. If it weren't for this Yundong, you would have been in danger. Li Jiandong smiled helplessly. You three. No one will listen to what I say in the future. Ziyuan smiled apologetically and said, I'm really sorry. I didn't listen to you and made things difficult for you. In the face of such a beautiful woman's soft apology, Li Jiandong couldn't vent his anger even if he was full of anger. He shook his head and said, Forget it. I was too conceited. I thought that these Japanese should still care about their face and wouldn't do such a shameless thing. But I didn't expect. I thought too highly of them. Ziyuan said softly, Li Jiandong, don't blame yourself. No sect or country would allow you to leave alive in such a situation. For cultivation sects, reputation and face are too important. Otherwise, if such a scandal were to spread, who would still join your sect? Who would still believe in your gods? In this way, the cornerstone of cultivation and faith will be shaken, and this will become a matter of life and death. Li Jiandong sighed softly. In this matter I was too naive. Thank you for your help. Otherwise, even if I could escape, I would have to pay a heavy price. Su Chan suddenly interrupted. Actually, Yundong, you don't have to think too much. I think even if the three of us didn't do anything, the chances of you escaping were still very high. Li Jiandong smiled and pinched the tip of the little girl's nose. You don't have to comfort me. I'm already reflecting on myself. In the past, I was always afraid that something would happen to you, so I didn't take you with me. Now it seems that you are growing very fast. It seems that you can already take charge of things on your own. In the future, I'll take you with me wherever I go, okay? Su Chan was overjoyed and said happily, Okay, take me with you wherever you go. Li Jiandong smiled and said, I'll take you with me when I take a bath, okay? Su Chan's ears turned red and she said angrily, You're so annoying. You're playing with me. Zhou Qin and Ziyuan smiled. Zhou Qin asked, By the way, Su Chan, you seemed very surprised and flustered before. You said that if you were late, you wouldn't be able to save Master. What's going on? The smile on Su Chan's face suddenly disappeared. She looked at Li Jiandong wanting to say something but hesitating. Li Jiandong asked curiously, Is there anything you can't say? Su Chan hesitated for a moment and said, Just now, I seem to feel a very strong fox demon chi appearing in a very far place. Li Jiandong's flying figure suddenly stopped. He was stunned and said, A very strong fox demon chi? Where is it? Su Chan pointed in the direction of the capital. It's over there, but it's very far away now. Li Jiandong asked, Are you familiar with this aura? Could it be your master? Su Chan shook her head and said, No, master's aura is not that strong. Ziyuan suddenly asked, Su Chan, how much stronger is this aura compared to your master's? Su Chan thought for a moment and said hesitantly, Master is a seven-tailed fox spirit. I feel that this aura is at least several times stronger than master's. It feels like a nine-tailed fox. What? Li Jiandong and the others immediately stopped in midair. At the same time they exclaimed in shock, Nine-tailed fox? Su Chan looked at Li Jiandong timidly and said weakly, I'm not sure, but at that time I felt that it should be the aura of a nine-tailed fox. Otherwise it wouldn't be so strong. Li Jiandong suddenly remembered what he had thought of in the secret room of the Fox Zen school. His heart skipped a beat and he murmured, Could it be the mystical silver fox? There was a flash of fear in Su Chan's eyes. She said, I don't think so. Why would the mystical silver fox be in Japan? Li Jiandong stared at Su Chan with bright eyes and said slowly, Chaner, in fact, you also believe that this is the mystical silver fox, right? Su Chan opened her mouth and swallowed her negative words. Finally she nodded helplessly. The little girl looked at Li Jiandong timidly and said, Yundong, if it's really the resurrection of the mystical silver fox, then what should we do? Li Jiandong's face was surprisingly serious. He looked at Ziyuan and Zhou Qin, only to see that his two left and right arms were also shocked. Li Jiandong said in a deep voice, If it's really the mystical silver fox, then it was too dangerous just now. Once these Japanese cultivators know that the mystical silver fox has escaped in Japan, they will definitely blame it on me. At that time, I really can't explain it and I will definitely die. Ziyuan took a deep breath and recovered from the shock. She calmed down and said, Now we should immediately find the whereabouts of the mystical silver fox. Zhou Qin asked in a deep voice, But where is the mystical silver fox? Ziyuan and Su Chan said in unison, I know where she is. Li Jiandong and Zhou Qin were stunned at the same time. They looked at the two of them and wondered in their hearts, why do both of them know the whereabouts of the mystical silver fox? Don't worry, the mystical silver fox is not the end of the story. The story is still long. Everyone take your time. In addition, I strongly recommend another fox book, Tyrant is Too Evil, Prefers Little Fox Princess, written by Meng Pe, a great writer. The link is here. Chapter 645. Li Yundong looked at Ziyuan and Su Chan in confusion and asked, "How do you two know where the mystical silver fox is?" Ziyuan and Su Chan looked at each other. Su Chan said, "Sister Ziyuan, you tell me." But unexpectedly, Ziyuan also said at the same time, "Su Chan, you tell me." As soon as the two of them finished speaking, they looked at each other and smiled. Li Yundong said helplessly, "Don't be modest at this time. Su Chan, you go first." Su Chan nodded and said, "Yundong, do you still remember Miss Chow?" Li Yundong was stunned for a moment. "Miss Chow? Chow Kefi?" Su Chan said, "Yes, the first time I saw Miss Chow, I felt that she had a very familiar aura. Not only me but other people in the Fox Zen school also felt that her aura was very familiar when they saw her, just like seeing a fellow disciple of the Fox Zen school. Yundong, don't you think it's strange?" At this time Ziyuan said, "And when I first saw her, she only had one soul and two spirits. Logically speaking, a person should have 3 souls and 7 spirits, but her soul is incomplete." Li Yundong was shocked and said subconsciously, "Is it really her?" Zhou Qin was tongue-tied as if she couldn't believe what Su Chan and Ziyuan had said. Chow Kefi was a famous businesswoman in Tianan City. She also had a personal relationship with Zhou Qin. But how could she imagine that such a beautiful businesswoman turned out to be the reincarnation of the mystical silver fox? Zhou Qin said, "Master, do you know that Miss Chow is the mystical silver fox?" Li Yundong's face was very ugly. He frowned and said, "When Yen Fang tried to kill Chow Kefi last time, I had already thought about this problem. Why would Yen Fang rather kill Chow Kefi without the Lioha sword? Moreover, if she wanted to kill Chow Kefi, she had 10,000 ways. Why did she choose to expel her soul?" At that time I had already guessed a little, but I couldn't believe it. As he said this, Li Yundong took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, "Now it seems that Chow Kefi should be the soul of the mystical silver fox's avatar." Su Chan looked at Li Yundong worriedly and said, "Yundong, what should we do now?" For some reason, Li Yundong suddenly felt agitated, and his thoughts were in a mess. "I don't know what to do. If Chow Kefi was really the mystical silver fox, what should he do? Kill the mystical silver fox? Or watching the mystical silver fox and Chow Kefi's soul merge into one? If that was the case, wouldn't Chow Kefi be dead?" Li Yundong knew that Chow Kefi had a good impression of him, so he had been avoiding her. But deep in Li Yundong's heart, he remembered Chow Kefi's kindness in helping him. As the saying goes, the grace of a drop of water should be repaid with a gushing spring. I haven't repaid Chow Kefi yet. Am I going to watch her die? How could this be? However, if Chow Kefi was really the remnant soul of the mystical silver fox, then she would definitely become the target of public criticism in the cultivation world. Everyone wanted to get rid of her as soon as possible. Even if the mystical silver fox did not come to retrieve her soul, other cultivation sects would not let her live. It could be said that Chow Kefi was already a person who was almost bound to die. But if he wanted to save Chow Kefi, he would be the enemy of the entire cultivation world. It could even be said that he would be the enemy of the mystical silver fox and the cultivation sects in the world at the same time. Even if he got all the spiritual power of the immovable wisdom king, it was impossible for him to challenge all the cultivators in the world and the mystical silver fox at the same time. But did he have to watch Chow Kefi die? Li Yundong's face turned blue. He clenched his fists and couldn't say anything for a long time. Ziyuan knew Li Yundong's worries very well. She thought for a moment and advised him softly, "Li Yundong, don't worry. In my opinion, you have a good relationship with Chow Kefi anyway. You can contact her privately as a friend first, and then act according to the circumstances. What do you think?" Li Yundong sighed and said, "What you said makes sense, but this is only a temporary measure, not a long-term plan. If Chow Kefi's identity was really exposed and others knew about it, then she would really be dead. Even I can't protect her." Zhou Qin said, "Since the mystical silver fox escaped from Japan, in my opinion, she is probably the former Tamamo no Mai. If it is really Tamamo no Mai, then it will be too troublesome. The Japanese cultivation world will definitely come to China to find the whereabouts of the mystical silver fox. If that's the case, then the pressure will be even greater. Li Yundong's face became even gloomier. He frowned and said after a long time, "Let's do as you say first. I'll go to find Chao Kefi, President Chao." Su Chan quickly said, "What about us?" Li Yundong looked at Su Chan and forced a smile. He took out the Medicine King tripod from his arms and said, "The three of you can be regarded as three Jinshin masters together. No one will dare to provoke you. So you are responsible for returning this Medicine King tripod to Shinwan Kai." Su Chan was disappointed when she saw that Li Yundong was unwilling to take her with him. She said with an aggrieved face, "Ah? You want me to return the Medicine King tripod? Sister Ziyuan and Sister Zhou Qin can go. Didn't you just say that you would take me with you wherever you go? Why didn't you fulfill your promise so soon?" Li Yundong sighed softly and gently patted Su Chan's head. "Silly girl, if you follow me it will be too eye-catching. At that time, it will attract other people's attention. If it's just me it'll be a little better. The chance of being discovered will be much smaller." Su Chan blinked her eyes and gently pulled Li Yundong's sleeve. She said considerately, "I know. You're right. I'm willful. Then I'll go to Mr. Shen's place with Sister Ziyuan and Sister Zhou Qin. Last time, the Medicine King tripod was stolen in front of me. It was so embarrassing. This time, I can't let anyone steal this Medicine King tripod." Ziyuan also smiled and said, "Li Yundong, don't worry. This time, we will never let the Medicine King tripod be stolen again." Zhou Qin said with concern, "Master, you must be careful alone. If you really meet the mystical silver fox, don't try to be brave. Even if the mystical silver fox takes over President Chao's body, maybe we still have a chance to save President Chao." Li Yundong smiled gratefully at the three of them and said, "I see. You three should also be careful." After the four of them finished their discussion, they flew back to Tianan City. After flying over Tianan City, Li Yundong said goodbye to Su Chan, Ziyuan, and Zhou Qin, and then flew to the building where Chao Kefi was. After Li Yundong found a relatively remote place to land, he took out his mobile phone and dialed Chao Kefi's number. However, after making a few calls, Chao Kefi didn't answer the phone. An ominous thought flashed through Li Yundong's mind. He quickly ran toward the Dongxing building. After entering the Dongxing building, Li Yundong went straight to the 9th floor. When he got to the 9th floor he rushed inside. The receptionist quickly stopped him and asked, "Sir, do you have an appointment?" Li Yundong didn't stop and said quickly, "I'm looking for Chao Kefi. Is she here?" Seeing that she couldn't stop him, the receptionist quickly stamped her feet and said, "Hey, you can't go in. Security, come on." As she spoke, a few security guards ran out of the office in the inner room, holding sticks in their hands. They stared at Li Yundong covetously, eager to have a try. Because of the previous incident of Wang Yong collecting debts in Chao Kefi's company, Chao Kefi fired all the security guards of the company and replaced them with a new batch. This time, the new batch of security guards were no longer those who had used their connections to get in, but soldiers who had been carefully selected by Chao Kefi and had retired from the army. These security guards were all as burly as bulls and tigers. Each of them was almost half a head taller than Li Yundong, and the tallest one was even 1.9 meters. Because there was a warm central air conditioner in the building, these security guards were all wearing camouflage short-sleeved shirts and tactical vests. There was a walkie-talkie and an electric baton hanging on the strap of the vest. They were fully equipped. They had an armed belt around their waists and a pair of cowhide hiking boots on their feet. These boots were hard and thick. When their legs were chopped down, it was no different from an axe chopping a person's body. These security guards were originally soldiers who had retired from the army. They were so masculine that they had nowhere to vent it. After coming to this media company where there were so many beautiful women, their hearts were itching. They had long wanted to try their skills and perform well in front of so many beautiful women. But how could there be so much trouble in the world? After Li Yundong had dealt with Wang Yong last time, who in Tianan City didn't know that Chao Kefi knew a master named Li Yundong. And on the day of the high-profile opening of the Desanxian, Li Yundong had taken Zhou Qin with him. Who didn't know that he and Zhou Qin had a very good relationship? As for who Zhou Qin was? What a joke. Everyone in Tianan City knew who Zhou Qin was. When people were out there they could not know who their parents were, but they absolutely had to know who those high-ranking officials and their children were. Otherwise, if they got used to being arrogant one day and couldn't stop themselves, they wouldn't even know how they died. It was also because of this relationship that which ignorant gangster in Tianan City dared to cause trouble for Chow Kefi? These days had been calm and the security guards had long been idle. At this time, seeing the movement at the door, they immediately rushed out excitedly, wishing they could immediately show off their power. But they were not fools. For the sake of their own jobs, they did not stupidly make a move immediately. The leading security guard pointed at Li Yundong's nose with his baton and shouted, "Hey, stop!" Li Yundong frowned slightly and glanced at the baton in front of his nose. He didn't want to cause a conflict with these secular people, so he took a step back. When the security guard saw Li Yundong retreat, he immediately turned his head proudly and said to the receptionist, "What happened?" When the receptionist saw them coming, she was a little relieved and quickly said, "As soon as he came in, he said he wanted to find President Chow. He rushed in with all his might. I couldn't stop him." The security guard looked Li Yundong up and down. Before he could say anything, he suddenly saw a white-collar woman passing by turn her head. After carefully looking at Li Yundong, she said in surprise, "You are Li Yundong?" Li Yundong was stunned. He glanced at the woman and saw that she was dressed in professional women's clothes. She had long wavy hair and was dressed in a fashionable and sexy way. She looked vaguely familiar. He thought for a moment and suddenly said, "I remember. You are Xiaoyu." The woman in front of him was none other than Xiaoyu, the beautiful white-collar woman who had secretly given him a note after Li Yundong had saved Chow Kefi and wanted to ask him out. After Li Yundong had declined at that time, the two of them had brushed past each other. They had thought that they would never meet again, but they had not expected to meet again today. When Xiaoyu saw that Li Yundong still remembered her, she was overjoyed. She reached out her hand and said with a smile, "I didn't expect you to still remember me. I thought that a noble person would have a short memory." After that, she pursed her lips and smiled. Li Yundong laughed and said, "Aren't you an employee of President Yin on the 19th floor? Why are you here? Where is President Chow?" Chapter 646. Xiaoyu chuckled and said, "President Chow went on a business trip and took a lot of people with her. There's not enough manpower here. I was entrusted by President Yin to come here to help." Li Yundong also knew the relationship between Yin Mengfan and Chow Kefi. He smiled and said, "Your two companies are really not polite to each other. By the way, where is President Chow? Why didn't she answer my call? Where did she go on a business trip?" Xiaoyu smiled and said, "She seems to have gone to Hainan on a business trip. If she didn't answer the phone, she might have been filming in the crew at that time. You can call her later. She should be able to get through." Li Yundong frowned. "Does she have another cell phone to contact her?" Xiaoyu shook her head. "No, are you in a hurry?" Li Yundong nodded. "Yes." Xiaoyu thought for a moment and said, "Then go to Hainan to find her. I'll tell you her address." After that, she took out her cell phone and said with a smile, "What's your cell phone number?" Li Yundong smiled slightly and told her his cell phone number. When Xiaoyu saw that she had asked for Li Yundong's cell phone number, she was overjoyed and quickly sent him the address via text message. After looking at the address, Li Yundong thanked her. Just as he was about to turn around and leave, he heard Xiaoyu shout, "Hey, are you going now?" Li Yundong nodded. "Yes, I'm going now." Xiaoyu thought for a moment and said tentatively, "Then I'll take you to the airport." Li Yundong was stunned and thought, "I'm going to fly there, but I'm not going to fly there by plane. It's so slow." But just now Li Yundong didn't know how to refuse. As he hesitated, Xiaoyu was afraid that Li Yundong would refuse, so she acted first and said later, "That's a deal. I'll go get the car key. You can go to the underground parking lot and wait for me." After that, she turned around and ran to her office. After a few steps, she turned back and said with a proud smile, "Don't sneak away. It's not easy to find the place where President Chow's crew lives. Without me, you might not be able to find it." Li Yundong shook his head and helplessly watched her trot away. He also went to the underground parking lot. At this time, several security guards looked at Li Yundong with unkind eyes. The leading security guard's eyes were especially gloomy. Seeing that Li Yundong was someone they knew, they didn't continue to stay on the spot. They walked to the corridor and lit a cigarette. A security guard said, "Hey Gangzi, Xiaoyu seems to be interested in this guy. Didn't you see the way she looked at this guy just now? It seems like she can't wait to throw herself at him immediately." The security guard named Gangzi had a gloomy face. He took a drag on his cigarette and spat it on the ground. Damn stinky. You always pretend to be virtuous in front of me. Aren't you just a gigolo? What's the big deal? A security guard suddenly whispered, "Hey Gangzi, do you want to take the opportunity to teach him a lesson?" Another security guard immediately said, "Are you crazy? Aren't you afraid of others finding out? There are spies everywhere. If you lose your job, where are you going to find a better job?" However, the security guard who spoke earlier sneered and said, "Are you stupid? There is a place where there is no camera at the entrance of the stairwell to the parking lot. Besides, don't you know how to wear an anti-terrorism helmet?" Another security guard echoed, "That's right. If you beat this kind of gigolo, he won't dare to say anything. What are you afraid of?" These words made several security guards look at each other. They were all soldiers who were used to fighting in the local army. Fighting was a common occurrence. Sneak attacks were as normal as eating and drinking. Before they came to Chow Kefi's company, they had been in the underworld for a period of time. They had been paid to eliminate disasters for others all day long. They were brave and ruthless. These days they were a little idle and they were worried that there was no place to sharpen their skills. A sharp light flashed in the eyes of Gangzi, who was the leader. He snorted, threw the cigarette in his hand to the ground, stepped on it heavily and crushed it into powder. He snorted angrily, "Humph brothers, let's go." The others were immediately overjoyed and said, "Let's go. I hate this kind of gigolo the most." Li Yundong didn't know that he had provoked a few retired security guards with bad intentions for no reason. After he walked to the underground parking lot, he looked at the vast number of cars and couldn't help smiling bitterly. Which car is Xiaoyu's? He took out his mobile phone and sent a text message to Xiaoyu saying, "Xiaoyu, which car is yours? Is it too late? Why don't I go there myself and not bother you?" But soon, Xiaoyu immediately called and said, "Hey, you're not allowed to go. We agreed to go together. I'm going to report to President Chow. You're not allowed to go alone. I'll be there soon. Wait for me." After that, she hung up the phone without saying anything. Li Yundong smiled bitterly and thought to himself, "This woman is forcing herself on me." Li Yundong shook his head. He wanted to leave alone, but he was afraid that after he left, as Xiaoyu had said, he wouldn't be able to find Chow Kefi's residence. He sighed helplessly. As soon as he put down his mobile phone, he felt a strong wind behind him, and a hard object hit the back of his head fiercely. At this time, Li Yundong was already a Jinshin master. He had fought countless times and had rich actual combat experience. How could he be attacked by such a small fry? Without batting an eyelid, he slid to the side like a ghost, and a rubber stick immediately brushed past him. Li Yundong looked back angrily, wanting to see which guy had a problem with him and dared to attack him. When he looked, he saw 4 burly men wearing anti-terrorism masks and holding rubber sticks pouncing on him. From their figures, it was obvious that they were the security guards. Li Yundong suddenly became furious. B****, I have no grudge against you. Why did you sneak attack me? Without saying a word, Li Yundong raised his hand and quietly released the fire magic. The security guards suddenly felt a burst of heat on their heads, followed by a pungent smoke. They looked at each other and pointed at each other's hoods in horror and shouted, "Oh my God, your hood is on fire." The 4 guys who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth quickly took off their hoods and rushed to the stairwell like crazy. But as soon as they moved, they saw that Li Yundong, who had been behind them, was already standing at the door, blocking their way like a mountain. Li Yundong said with a cold face, "Why did you sneak attack me?" Although the leader of the security guards, Gangzi, was a lot bigger than Li Yundong and held a weapon in his hand, Li Yundong had dodged the sneak attack just now. Obviously he was also a person who knew kung fu. Especially when he raised his hand, his hood was actually on fire. This was too strange and terrifying. What on earth is this guy? Is he a monster? Gangzi felt that he was in the wrong, but he also felt that the guy in front of him was a little unusual. He gritted his teeth, lowered his head and rushed in another direction. He shouted to his companions in a low voice, "Go." But as soon as he moved, he saw Li Yundong standing in front of them again and said coldly, "Answer my question first." Gangzi was so scared that his hair stood on end. He immediately turned his head and looked at the door. Sure enough, he saw Li Yundong standing at the door again. This scared the 4 security guards out of their wits. Even though they were usually bold, when they saw the scene in front of them, they were almost scared out of their wits. Gangzi said in horror, "Are you a human or a ghost?" Li Yundong stared at them and shouted, Why did you sneak attack me? Answer my question first. This stare was as sharp as a sword, pointing directly at people's hearts. Gangzi's heart trembled and he said subconsciously, "What's your relationship with Xiaoyu?" Xiaoyu? Li Yundong was stunned as if he couldn't believe his ears. "You're not going to make trouble for me because you're jealous, are you?" At this time the other security guards also summoned up their courage and shouted, "Xiaoyu is our Gangzi's girlfriend. If you know what's good for you, stay away." "Hey, do you understand the principle of first come, first served?" Li Jiandong didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He couldn't believe it. The mystical silver fox had appeared in the world, and the whole cultivation world was about to usher in a terrible bloody storm. These guys were actually jealous of him for a woman. But Li Yundong also knew that these guys didn't know what had happened before. Stupid and ignorant people were always busy with trivial things. Although in their eyes these small things were no different from the whole of their lives, they didn't know that for some people in this world, such things were as ridiculous as children's play. After Li Yundong stared at these guys for a long time, he waved his hand helplessly and said, "Let's go. I have nothing to do with her. Don't be so stupid in the future. Aren't you afraid of killing people? The next time I see you fighting indiscriminately like this, I won't be so nice to talk to you anymore." After he finished speaking, Xiaoyu suddenly came out of the elevator next to him. She looked at Li Yundong curiously, and then looked at the 4 security guards next to her in confusion. She asked with a puzzled face, "What happened?" The security guard named Gangzi suddenly became nervous. Li Yundong smiled and said, "Nothing, just a misunderstanding. Hurry up. I'm in a hurry." Xiaoyu glanced at the hood that was still burning on the ground, as if she had understood something. She glared at Gangzi and the other security guards unhappily, and then got into a Porsche. She skillfully started the car and drove it to Li Yundong. As soon as she opened the door, she said with a smile, "Get in the car." After Li Yundong got in the car, Xiaoyu stepped on the accelerator, and the rear of the car spewed out a burst of exhaust gas. Only then did she drive away, leaving Gangzi and the other 4 security guards standing there with gloomy faces. Xiaoyu drove the car and looked at the scene behind her through the rearview mirror. She saw the 4 security guards looking at them leave with unkind eyes, so she said to Li Yundong, "They didn't do anything to you just now, did they?" Li Yundong smiled slightly and said, "No, don't think too much." Xiaoyu sighed slightly and said, "These guys are very professional, but I feel that they are bandits. They are too brave and fierce, which is quite a headache. If you don't think it's good, I'll go back and talk to President Chao and ask her to fire these guys." Li Yundong chuckled and said, "That's not necessary." Xiaoyu quickly glanced at Li Yundong. She was used to scheming with people in the office, so she subconsciously thought to herself, "Will he think that I'm too nosy? With his relationship with President Chao, it's not my place to make irresponsible remarks here, is it?" Xiaoyu smiled and said, "That's right. You have such a good relationship with President Chao. What you say is more useful than what I say." Li Yundong smiled slightly and didn't say anything else. Although Xiaoyu wanted to talk to Li Yundong, she saw that Li Yundong's eyebrows were full of worry and he looked like he had a lot on his mind. She tried to talk to Li Yundong a few times, but after his reaction was cold, she stopped doing useless things. She was very sad and self-pitying. Alas, why can't I meet such a good man? Why is it that in the end he is always taken away by a rich woman like President Chao? Xiaoyu was thinking about this problem all the way, but Li Yundong didn't pay attention to her little woman's thoughts. What he was most afraid of now was that something bad had happened to Chao Kefi, which would be big trouble. Fortunately, Xiaoyu had already booked plane tickets in the name of the company before going. After they arrived at the airport, they quickly flew to Haikao, Hainan. After arriving at Haikao, Hainan, Xiaoyu took Li Yundong into a taxi, and then they went straight to the holiday beach of Haikao. After driving for a while, Xiaoyu and Li Yundong arrived at the Xinghua State Guest House near the holiday beach. After getting out of the car, Xiaoyu used her hands to block the sun from the sky and said with a wry smile, "It's so hot. Why is it so hot here?" Li Yundong looked around and saw that the 5-star hotel next to the holiday beach was surrounded by tourists in short clothes and shorts. The sun was shining high in the sky, and the air was hot as if it was midsummer. At the entrance of the Xinghua Hotel, Li Yundong noticed a familiar figure holding a large bouquet of flowers and looking up, as if he was looking forward to the arrival of someone. There were so many flowers in this person's hands that they almost covered his whole face. But when he looked around, Li Yundong could still clearly see his appearance. This person was none other than Zhao Yuzhen, who had once pursued Chao Kefi and had a lot of conflicts with Li Yundong. Li Yundong suddenly felt as if he had seen a fly, and his heart was full of unease. Why is this guy here? Sorry, it's even later today. Chapter 647. Since the last time Desangxian opened, Zhao Yuzhen had failed to be arrogant and had been humiliated by Li Yundong. He had become a lot more low-key for fear that Li Yundong would come back to make trouble for him. 126. With Li Yundong's background, if he wanted to make trouble for Zhao Yuzhen, it would be as easy as crushing an ant to death. However, after the opening of Desangxian, Li Yundong was held back by some things in the cultivation world. Not to mention making trouble for Zhao Yuzhen, he didn't even have time to take care of the business of Desangxian. Zhao Yuzhen waited in fear for a few days, but he didn't wait for Li Yundong's revenge. In particular, Li Yundong seemed to have evaporated in the secular life, which made Zhao Yogen's courage slowly grow again. Zhao Yuzhen had always coveted such a beautiful woman like Chao Kefi. He didn't dare to make trouble for Li Yundong again, but he still dared to go back to pursue Chao Kefi. Moreover, he had carefully inquired about it. Li Yundong didn't seem to be very interested in this beautiful female boss, and there didn't seem to be any relationship between them. Therefore, Zhao Yuzhen once again used his own tricks and pestered Chao Kefi. Zhao Yuzhen was holding a large bouquet of flowers in his arms. There were 99 flowers, each of which had just been picked from the flower garden. The petals were still wet with rain and dew. They were crystal clear and the fragrance of the flowers was assuring. Although Zhao Yuzhen was not very good looking, he was wearing famous brands from head to toe. The Armani suit was very neat, the Fendi leather shoes were shiny, and the Rolex watch was shining. In addition, he was holding a large bouquet of flowers in his arms, which attracted the attention of many women. Under the gazes of these women, Zhao Yuzhen couldn't help feeling a little complacent. His back became straighter and straighter, and his chin was raised high, like a soldier waiting for inspection. After waiting for a few minutes, a Toyota commercial van suddenly drove into the entrance of the hotel. With a crash of the door, a girl jumped out of the car. The girl was wearing a pair of huge sunglasses that almost covered half of her face. However, from the exposed bright red and tender lips, as well as her snow-white and delicate skin, one could tell that she was an extremely beautiful woman. This woman wore a bright yellow silk dress, a milky white straw hat, and a pair of white high-heeled sandals. Her long black hair cascaded down her shoulders like a waterfall, making her look pure and beautiful. Zhao Yogen's eyes lit up as soon as he saw the girl. He glanced at her greedily and then walked up quickly. He stretched out his hand with a smile on his face and said, "Hello, Miss Lu Feier." This girl was none other than Lu Feier, the big star who had skipped work with Chao Kefi to attend the opening ceremony of the Desangxian. She saw Zhao Yuzhen at a glance, and a look of disgust flashed in her eyes hidden behind the sunglasses. But she still politely reached out her hand and gently shook hands with him. "Hello, Mr. Zhao, nice to see you again." Lu Feier's words, "I see you again," contained a hint of sarcasm. In recent days this man had been circling around their crew like a fly. A while ago, he had been waiting for the crew to finish shooting to present flowers to Chao Kefi. Chao Kefi had no choice but to hide from Zhao Yuzhen everywhere. However, this guy didn't give up and simply blocked them at the place where they were staying. He really won't give up until he reaches the Yellow River, Lu Feier thought to herself. She looked back at Chao Kefi in the car and thought to herself, "Sister Chao, good luck. I've helped you several times, but I can't help you this time." Lu Feier quickly pulled her little hand out of Zhao Yogen's hand and then quickly flashed to one side. She quietly rubbed her hand behind her, as if she wanted to wipe away Zhao Yogen's breath. After taking a greedy look at Lu Feier, Zhao Yuzhen reluctantly withdrew his gaze. He knew that this girl was not someone he could afford to pursue. Although most girls who set foot in the film and television circle did so to pursue the flashy and vanity of the flash, Lu Feier was a girl who set foot in this circle purely because she liked acting. Lu Feier was born in a famous family. She had no worries about food and clothing, and her background was quite strong. If there was a film, she would make a film. If there was no film, she would be idle. No matter how capable other directors and dignitaries were, no matter how much they wanted to sleep with her, they couldn't sleep with her. All the unspoken rules in the world were like Zhou Yu beating Huang Gai. One was willing to fight while the other was willing to suffer. As the saying goes, flies don't hug seamless eggs, right? Because of this, Lu Feier seemed to be quite independent in the turbid film and television circle. Zhao Yuzhen also knew that this little girl didn't fall for his trick at all, so he didn't waste his time on Lu Feier. But Chao Kefi was different. She was the boss of a film and television company, and there were hundreds of employees waiting to be fed. In addition, she had worked hard over the years to get such achievements. How could she give up so easily? A woman working hard in the business world was like a sheep in a wolf's pen. A beautiful woman working hard in the business world was like a fragrant, white and tender sheep in a forest surrounded by wolves. She was surrounded by fierce gazes from all directions. It was okay for this woman to have a background, but if she didn't, her life would be difficult. When Chao Kefi saw Zhao Yuzhen, she complained in her heart and couldn't help glaring at the director with hatred. Seeing her glaring at him, the director smiled embarrassedly and said, "Xiao Chao, don't be like this. We'll see each other all the time. You have to save face." Chao Kefi said in a low voice, "If you hadn't told me whose money it was, I wouldn't have had to hide here and there today. It's like a war. It's so annoying." After Chao Kefi and Lu Feier had attended the opening ceremony of the Three Immortals, Chao Kefi had stayed in Tianan City for a long time. Later, she had wanted to test Li Jiandong's attitude, but at this time, this little boy had disappeared from the world with her. Chao Kefi was furious, but there was no better way. She had to put her endless entanglements and worries into endless work. But soon, Chao Kefi found that the shooting team had encountered a terrible thing. Because of the delay in the shooting progress, their funds had exceeded the budget. The original investors were unwilling to invest any more money, and they had no money to use. Chao Kefi had no choice but to negotiate with the investors. She didn't expect that the other party wanted to take the opportunity to sleep with her. How could Chao Kefi agree? She had to ask for help everywhere. Just as she was in a dilemma, the director patted his chest and said that he could get a sponsor. Chao Kefi, who was at the end of her rope, was overjoyed and quickly asked who the investor was. However, the director refused to tell her, only saying that it was a reliable friend. Chao Kefi and the director had been friends for many years, so she agreed without thinking much. But when the money came in, Chao Kefi found that it was Zhao Yuzhen who had invested it. This time she had really let a wolf into the house. Chao Kefi was well aware of Zhao Yuzhen's intentions, but at this time the shooting work was at a standstill. If the whole film was not finished, it would cause great trouble to the company. Although Zhao Yuzhen's money was not a lot in normal times, it was really a life-saving money at this time. However, since he was the one who took it from him, it would be a little unreasonable for him to hide from him like he did in the past. Chao Kefi complained to the director, who said with a smile, "Oh, for the sake of the crew, you should sacrifice yourself and help us." In a film crew, the director was the boss. In a TV crew, the producer was the boss. No matter what the crew was, the investor was the boss. No matter how reluctant Chao Kefi was, she could only pretend to be a snake. She sighed helplessly and got out of the car. She smiled at Zhao Yuzhen as if she was wearing a mask and said, "Mr. Zhao, why are you here?" Zhao Yuzhen smiled very brightly. He held the flowers in his hand in front of Chao Kefi and said, "Mr. Chao, this is for you." Chao Kefi wanted to burn the flowers, but she still had to pinch her nose and take the bouquet of flowers. She forced a smile and said, "Mr. Zhao, I'm sorry to trouble you again." As she spoke, she kept walking and said quickly, "Today's shooting is too tiring. Let's go back and have a good rest." "Mr. Zhao, excuse me." Zhao Yuzhen quickly followed a few steps and said with a smile, "Mr. Chao, would you like to have dinner together tonight?" Chao Kefi sighed softly and looked at Lu Feier not far away helplessly. "I have an appointment with someone else today." Zhao Yuzhen looked disappointed, but he soon smiled and said, "What about tomorrow?" Chao Kefi forced a smile and said, "Tomorrow? No, I also have an appointment tomorrow." Seeing Chao Kefi's refusal, Zhao Yuzhen was angry in his heart, but he also had the spirit of fighting again and again. He asked unyieldingly, "What about the day after tomorrow? I'll be free the day after tomorrow, right?" The smile on Chao Kefi's face froze and she cursed in her heart, "Is this guy a sticky candy?" Chao Kefi looked embarrassed and said with a sad expression, "Mr. Zhao, the crew has been really busy these days, so..." Zhao Yuzhen's smile gradually disappeared. He sighed softly and said with an unfriendly look, "Well, in fact, I want to talk to you about the investment. I invested the money in installments, so..." Chao Kefi cursed in her heart, "How dare this King Zhao Yuzhen threaten me? After all, Chow Kefi had been in the business world for many years, so she had developed the ability to adapt to changing circumstances and be good at using money. She immediately smiled and said, "Mr. Zhao, you misunderstood me. I want to say that although the crew has been really busy these days, we still have time to have a meal. After all, Mr. Zhao, you are our investor. Even if you don't do it for my sake, you should do it for my sake, right?" Chow Kefi's words were like a needle in silk floss. She secretly mocked Zhao Yuzhen for threatening a weak woman with money and power. But Zhao Yuzhen didn't care so much. In this day and age, money was everything. Who cared what means you used? Zhao Yuzhen smiled proudly and said, "Mr. Chow, you also misunderstood me. I mean, although the money is invested in installments, you can completely trust me. I, Zhao Yuzhen, have always been a man of my word. I won't go back on my word." Chow Kefi laughed. Naturally, she refused to believe Zhao Yuzhen's words, but she said, "Of course. Who doesn't know Mr. Zhao's integrity?" Zhao Yuzhen seized the opportunity and said, "That's settled then. The night after tomorrow? At the new state guest house?" Chow Kefi forced a smile and said, "Well, see you tomorrow night." After a hypocritical exchange of pleasantries, they left with smiles on their faces. After Chow Kefi watched Zhao Yuzhen leave, the smile on her face immediately disappeared, and she walked into the hotel with a cold face. At this time, Li Jiandong, who was watching Chow Kefi not far away, suddenly hesitated. Should I go in and meet Chow Kefi face to face? Or should I observe for a while? Li Jiandong hesitated for a moment. Suddenly, he felt a faint trace of cold qi appear nearby. He followed Chow Kefi into the hotel. This qi was extremely weak. If it weren't for the fact that Li Jiandong's Yuanyang qi was extremely strong and pure, he wouldn't have felt this strange qi at all. Although it was only for a moment, Li Jiandong still felt the strength of this qi, as if it was the tip of an iceberg slightly revealed under the calm ocean. Li Jiandong knew that the mystical silver fox had already arrived near Chow Kefi. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.